Chapter 92. Tang Yuan gloated and shook his head. Yes, yes, I really despise him. In fact, I really brought money. If I didn't bring money, I wouldn't have dared to bid rashly. This is the magnificent jewel hall. They can't even tell the truth from a lie. If it was me, I would have found a tree to hang myself from. How can his family be at ease with him coming out and casually give him such a large sum of money? After this farce, Meng Haizhou finally won the jade coral that he was determined to get with a price that was more than 10 times the original bid price. However, no matter which outsider saw this scene, they would still look down on him. Spending 5 million taels of silver to buy a jade coral that was worth at most 500,000 taels of silver. This was no longer considered a wastrel. This was simply a sin. Moreover, it did not arouse the slightest bit of sympathy from others. In the eyes of a discerning person, this jade coral was clearly something that Tang Yuan was determined to win. After all, Fatty Tang was the first to bid a price of 1 million taels of silver, which greatly exceeded the value of the jade coral itself. The two young masters of the Li and Meng families were obviously trying to drive up the price. However, they did not expect that after driving up the price, the other party would withdraw and instead smash it into their own hands. This was tantamount to lifting a stone and smashing their own feet. Evil will have evil retribution. Everyone looked at Tang Yuan one after another. Kid, you're too inexperienced. If you weren't in such a hurry and bid slowly, you would have been able to buy it after a while. The way Li Jun looked at Meng Haizhou was actually the same as the way he looked at Tang Yuan. It was the same gloating expression. Little guy, I'll let this bastard kid play tricks on me again. Didn't you smash it into your own hands? You deserve it. Tang Yuan put on the expression of a victim. Although his face was bitter, his heart was blooming with joy. Looking at Li Jun and Meng Haizhou's dejected expressions, he felt extremely relieved. This time, he had gotten his revenge and even repaid his debt with interest. Comfortable, delightful, refreshing. At this time, the attendant of the magnificent jewel hall had already brought over the jade coral, which was covered with a red silk cloth. Li Jun and Meng Haizhou gritted their teeth. Their hearts were bleeding, but they still forced out a smile. It would have been fine if they had been crying all the time. But the feeling of relief that they felt while their hearts were aching caught Jun Mo's attention. He didn't know much about the jade coral. When he asked Tang Yuan and didn't get an answer, he became even more puzzled. This thing must be of great use to them. Well, if it was useful to the enemy, then it would definitely be disadvantageous to him. No, I must destroy it. No matter what use they had, Jun Moxie would only be at ease if they became useless. Wow, this was the jade coral that was worth 5 million taels of silver. The fart of a deity is indeed extraordinary. Jun Moxie smiled insincerely as he watched Li Jun carefully take the jade coral. He pursed his lips and whistled loudly as he lightly touched Tang Yuan with his toes. Tang Yuan understood and immediately made a straight face. Looking at the jade coral, he sighed and said with a face full of grief, "Third young master, what should we do? Before I came, old master had given me a death order to bring this thing home. But now, you see, I am really going to die." This sentence was not spoken in a low voice, so Li Jun and the others naturally heard it. Suddenly, their gloomy mood decreased a lot. It turned out that this was something that old Master Tang was determined to obtain. No wonder this fatty was so desperate. Thinking of this, they were a little complacent. I didn't think that we brothers would inadvertently defeat old Master Tang. This is really cool. Jun Moxie's mouth twitched and his face changed. He disdainfully said, "Isn't it just a jade coral? Look at your two families fighting so fiercely. This kind of thing, my family has several of them. I don't care." What? Li Jun's face instantly turned red. Jun Moxie, stop bragging. Your Jun family is so poor. How could you have such a good thing? And several of them? Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? Jun Moxie suddenly jumped up as if there was a spring under his feet. His face turned red as he said, "Li Jun, what do you mean? This kind of jade coral, His Majesty once gave my grandfather several of them. No matter which one it was, They were all much bigger than this one. Oomph, you really don't know much. Li Jun laughed and said, "What a joke, June Moxie. What is a bumpkin like you know? This is jade coral. Do you know what jade coral is? I really can't be bothered with you. My family's is also jade coral. It's this big." June Moxie gestured with his hands. "Fatty Tang has seen it before. Why would I lie to you?" After gesturing for a while, he seemed to feel that it was a little inappropriate, so he simply stepped forward and gestured above the jade coral that Li Jun was holding. His gesture was not a big deal, but it was more than twice the size of the jade coral that Li Jun was holding. In the end, he snorted and said with extreme disdain, "The one in my house is bright red, much better than yours." But his heart was moved. While he was gesturing, June Moxie secretly activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Suddenly, he felt a slight flow of air flowing from the jade coral. Moreover, when his own Xian-Chi path felt this flow of air, it clearly became active. So this jade coral is actually useful for Xian-Chi. June Moxie snorted in his heart. But this aura is somewhat similar to the spiritual energy in my Hongjun pagoda. June Mo Xie consciously guided this chi into his meridians as he thought about this. He was prepared to take drastic measures to remove the firewood from the bottom of the cauldron. However, he suddenly felt a burst of discomfort. The Hongjun pagoda in his sea of consciousness rotated, and the spiritual chi gushed out like a tide. Is it repelling each other? June Moxie's eyes turned. At this time, Li Jun was already seething with anger from June Mo Xie's 7 orifices. He angrily took off the red silk cloth and roared, "Look clearly. This is jade coral. Jade coral. Your family's is just an ordinary red coral. F***CK. What do you know?" June Moxie laughed loudly. "No matter what kind of coral it is, the texture is the same. Li Jun, you really are an idiot. 5 million to buy a piece of trash." As he said this, he casually stretched out his hand and pinched the jade coral twice, frowning. "It seems to be a little different." As he said this, the art of unlocking heaven's fortune was fully activated. A thin but pure stream of air instantly rushed in like a hot knife through butter, occupying a position inside. 2 diametrically opposed streams of air collided, unexpectedly expelling the original stream of air inside to one side. But as June Moxie retracted his hand, the original stream of air immediately backfired, quickly rushing back, tightly wrapping around the art of unlocking heaven's fortune stream of air layer by layer. June Moxie quietly used his divine sense to observe. Under the stimulation of the 2 streams of air, the jade coral at this moment had already become a mass of berserk chi. He could not help but laugh sinisterly in his heart. "It seems it can't be used anymore, wah. How is it? It's different from your family's red coral, right? Ha ha." Li Jun rarely had the upper hand. Seeing June Moxie's defeated appearance, his heart was filled with boundless joy. "It really is different." June Moxie's face was somewhat pale, withdrawing his hand, rubbing his nose, his face full of doubt. "It's the same coral. How can it be different?" Tang Yuan was greatly surprised, also moving forward to touch it, clicking his tongue in wonder. Ming and Li Jun's vanity immediately swelled, feeling greatly honored, laughing without end. After a long time, with a satisfied expression, he fiercely looked at June Moxie and Tang Yuan, saying, "Have you seen enough? You don't have it, right? Envious. Ah, fatty, huh?" He unhurriedly wrapped it up, looking at Tang Yuan from the corner of his eyes, taking pleasure in his misfortune. "Umph, we didn't get the jade coral. Go back and see how your old man will deal with you." But the Tang family's old man is the instigator, and this reason can be used to offset the silver. Perhaps there is hope for reimbursement. June Moxie's face was full of embarrassment, but in his heart he ruthlessly said, "It would be strange if I didn't kill you." Chapter 93. With such a prodigal competition at the bottom, although the next few rounds of auctions were also sold at a high price, there was not much fluctuation and naturally, it did not cause a sensation. After that, the blazing heart meridian that June Moxie had been waiting for finally appeared. The blazing heart meridian is a highly toxic grass. also known as the bone-transforming smoke. If an ordinary person touches it, their soul will fly away and scatter. However, for a specific group of people, it is a priceless treasure that is enough to bring back the dead. Especially if a person was poisoned, if they took this item, it would be able to restrain the poison, and it would have an immediate effect. If there is a high-level Xian Qi practitioner taking this opportunity to detoxify the poison of the blazing heart meridian and guide it into the limbs and bones of the body, it can create a body that is immune to all poisons. The starting price is 200,000 silver taels. Each increment must be no less than 10,000 silver taels. The purple-robed old man took out a white jade box and opened the lid. A black lotus with leaves stood quietly, exuding a demonic and dangerous color. No wonder it was pushed to the end. It turned out to be a black, blazing heart meridian. Looking at the grayish-black color, it should be more than 500 years old. This is much more effective than ordinary goods. It's truly a good thing. 500 years old is a rare treasure even in my previous world. Jun Imo sighed in relief and said in a low voice, "Fatty, this is what I want," he said as he raised 3 fingers. In his heart, he secretly said, "Although your explanation was very detailed, you still ignored another important use of the blazing heart meridian. However, if you really knew, I am afraid you would not take it out for auction." The blazing heart meridian. This was the name in the Xian continent. On Earth, as long as the blazing heart meridian had exceeded 200 years of age, it would have another name, Heaven and Earth Bridge. This had become the dream of all martial artists. As long as a special method was used to remove the poison and take this, it could instantly open up the stagnant meridians and connect the Heaven and Earth Bridge. It could increase a martial artist's strength by more than 20 years. As for the 500-year-old blazing heart meridian, it was the best of the best. With it, the hope of Jun Wui's recovery was more than 90%. This was just Jun Moxie's conservative estimate. As soon as Jun Moxie and the purple-robed elder finished speaking, Fatty Tang's voice suddenly rang out. "I bid 300,000 taels." As soon as this voice came out, everyone in the huge hall twitched their mouths. This prodigal has jumped out again. Although this fellow only increased the bid by 100,000 taels this time, compared to the previous increase of 10,000 taels, this was still 10 times more. Don't fight with him. If you raise the price and this guy doesn't want it anymore, you'll have no place to cry. Didn't they see that young Master Ming vomit blood on the spot? As a result, after Fatty Tang spoke, the entire place fell silent. No one answered for a long time. To be honest, the purple-robed old man was slightly dumbfounded as well. Could it be that this blazing heart meridian that could be sold for at least 800,000 taels was actually sold for 300,000 taels? However, the magnificent jewel hall had such a rule. After a moment, the old man once again raised the hammer and said, "Young Master Tang bids 300,000 taels. Is there a higher bid?" After a pause, he said, 300,000 taels, going once, 300,000 taels, going twice. Suddenly, a hoarse voice fiercely said, "I bid 3,000,000 taels." The one who bid this sky-high price was none other than Li Jun. Tang Yuan saw that he had succeeded, but Li Jun had interfered. He could not help but be furious and jumped to the door of the box and shouted, "Damn it! You dare to compete with me? I bid 500. Suddenly, his mouth was covered by someone. It was Jun Moxie. Although he did not finish his sentence, it still made everyone in the hall break out in a cold sweat. Everyone could guess that this fatty was about to shout, 5,000,000 taels. Crazy. This fatty must be crazy. Jun Imo twisted his neck and walked out. His sickly face had yet to disappear, but his domineering attitude was evident. Lifting his robe, he stepped on the railing outside the private room with a pu sound. Casually, he took off his hat and held it in his hand. His robe was slanted, and his eyes were crooked as he shouted angrily, "Li Jun, you son of a bitch. Was it you who bid just now? Do you want to die?" "Yes, it was this young master." "What are you going to do? This is an auction house. You can bid, but I can't. Are you going to bite me?" Li Jun's anger soared to the nine heavens, and he jumped out without hesitation. What am I going to do? Bah! Jun Moxie vividly played the role of a prodigal son. His mouth was crooked and his eyes were slanted as he roared. Motherf asterisk her. You have just emptied your pockets, and you still want to take out 3,000,000 taels of silver? Surnamedly, it is not that I am looking down on you. Why don't you take out 3,000,000 taels for me to see? As long as you take it out, this stalk of grass is yours. If you can't take it out, Motherf asterisk her. I want to ask, why are your two families making things difficult for Fatty again and again? Do you have a grudge against the Tang family? Or do you have a grudge against old Master Tang? Opposite him, Dugu Xiaoi's smile was like a flower. She chuckled and said, Look at this guy. He is really annoying. A good black lotus is actually said to be a stalk of grass by him. How ignorant he! Princess Lingming, who was standing beside her, looked at her in surprise. She stretched out her hand to touch her forehead. Is this sister having a fever today? Just a moment ago, she looked like she had a lot on her mind. Why did she suddenly change into a different person? These past few days, the Dugu family had been restless because of Dugu Xiaoi. This was because this young lady had suddenly changed these past few days. Her original cheerful and lively personality had inexplicably disappeared. She would often shed tears and would sit alone in a daze. She would often not eat. This made General Dugu Wudi's heart ache. Unfortunately, he and his wives had taken turns to ask questions, but they had not been able to get any answers. They could only watch as his daughter became thinner day by day. Dugu Wudi could neither scold nor beat her. He was extremely depressed and had no choice but to catch his sons and nephews and beat them up. Fortunately, Madame Dugu had a way to invite Princess Raimu to accompany Dugu Xiaoi. Only then did the situation improve a little. A few days ago, they had received the notice of the magnificent Jewel Hall's auction. So, they had rushed the two of them to come and relax. Dugu Xiaoi was also very reluctant and had no choice but to come out. Who would have thought that once she arrived here, she would suddenly have no more problems? How could this not be shocking? Could it be that the magnificent Jewel Hall had other miraculous medicines? Li Jun and the others looked at each other in dismay. Don't even mention 3,000,000 taels of silver. If the few of them could pool together 100,000 taels of silver, that would already be good. How could they possibly come up with 3,000,000 taels of silver? A bunch of paupers. I really can't be bothered with you. Jun Moxie snorted with extreme disdain. He patted his buttocks and said, Even a fart from this father is worth more than your words. What kind of joke is this? If you don't have money, then why are you pretending to be a maggot? Jun Mo Xie arrogantly faced the crowd as he said this. It seemed as if he didn't feel bad spending money. Who else wants it? Don't be polite, come on. He snapped his fingers and said, It's only a few million taels of silver. Everyone turned their heads and pretended not to hear him. They just treated his words as a fart. A few million taels of silver to buy a medicinal herb? Do you think it's an immortal herb that can bring a dying person back to life? Which normal person would do such a stupid thing? Two huge spiritual pressures from an unknown place suddenly pressed down on Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie's face paled. He thought quickly and shivered. He cursed, What a terrible weather. Why is it so cold? The two spiritual pressures circled around him, but they didn't find anything unusual and disappeared in an instant. Jun Moxie sneered in his heart. If you guys really found out, then I don't need to roam Jianghu anymore. At midnight, Xie Jun will be on the shelves. The new book monthly ticket list is surrounded by strong enemies and gods. Whether Xie Jun can kill his way out or not, it will all depend on the brothers and sisters. Feng Ling himself has been saving for a long time. Brothers and sisters, use your monthly tickets to let me explode once. Come on, use your monthly tickets to knock me out. Brothers, try your best. Feng Ling will go all out to write more. I don't dare to boast, but I can guarantee that my brothers and sisters will be satisfied. 2 chapters, 3 chapters, 4 chapters, 5 chapters, 6 chapters? Waha, explode. Explode. Brothers and sisters, accompany me to conquer the world. Accompany me to dance in the wind and clouds. Let us witness and create an evil monarch's pinnacle moment together. Look at the black hole in front. Let us kill our way forward. Roar. Chapter 94. The Evil Prince was finally published. This was Feng Ling's second book. When it was time to publish again, he was reluctant to part with it. Being published was the beginning of an author's income. Of course, Feng Ling was happy, but it also meant that the brothers who had accompanied the Evil Prince all the way would leave him and go to their own websites. Here, Feng Ling solemnly declared that piracy could not be prohibited. Feng Ling didn't mean anything else. He just couldn't bear to part with them. It was the brothers and sisters who pushed the Evil Prince to the first place. Click first. Recommend third. Feng Ling was very content. Thank you. Here, about a thank you. No matter where you go, you are my brothers. They're all my sisters. I only hope that when I have time, I can go back to the starting point to see Feng Ling and the Evil Prince. Leaving behind a footprint is enough for my wish. Many brothers and sisters don't have the financial ability at the moment. It's good enough that they can continue to pay attention to this book. Feng Ling only hopes that you can read happily, live happily, and achieve success in your studies. Thank you, my brothers and sisters who still fight with me at the starting point. We will go all the way, no matter how rough it is. We will go all the way. I won't say any more words. Saying too much will make me look fake. Brothers and sisters, watch my action. Thank you, Fei Ligua, the chief editor of Chidian Group 5, my editor Zianke, and Fruit Jelly. The three editors have given me so much help that the Evil Prince can have today. Thank you. Looking back on his writing career for 1.5 years, he had mixed feelings. Everyone knew that when he published the first book, Feng Ling was not in good health. He lost his job and was emotionally hurt. He even borrowed a lot of money to pay for his medical expenses. From a penniless poor boy who owed tens of thousands of debts to the author of 2 books today, the bitterness was unbearable to recall. From the time the first book was published in Ling Tian to the time The Evil Monarch was published today, a whole year had passed. In the past year, Feng Ling had basically been writing all night long. He slept during the day. A rough calculation showed that there were at least 200 days in a year where he wrote in the second half of the night. Needless to say, everyone could understand the hardships. Everyone had basically experienced pulling an all-nighter before. 1 day was fine, 2 days was fine, but if it was a week or a long period of time, there were not many people who had tasted this feeling. I remember a time when I was chatting in the group, a brother from Skypole said something that made me stare at my computer screen in a daze for half an hour. I suddenly had the urge to cry. He said, I can sit comfortably in front of the computer every day. I only need to spend 5 or 6 yuan a month to buy you a month of work. Worth it. Only God knows how I felt when I saw this sentence. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. All sorts of emotions welled up in his heart at the same time. The evil lord was on the shelves. He didn't want his brothers and sisters who didn't have the financial ability to subscribe for the sake of the evil lord. If that was the case, Feng Ling would feel uneasy. He only hoped that his brothers and sisters, who had the ability and conditions, could subscribe and support Feng Ling in completing this book. Feng Ling would be extremely grateful. Thank you. We will always be brothers, sisters forever. Feng Ling Tian, 3rd a.m., May 1st, 2010. Chapter 95. At this time, the purple-robed old man's eyes flashed, and then he nodded, seemingly listening to someone speak. His face showed a trace of embarrassment, but quickly disappeared. He opened his mouth and said, Blazing Heart Meridian, young Master Tang Yuan has bid 5 million. Is there anyone who wants to bid higher than this price? Junimo Xie suddenly staggered and stared at him. Old man, you are making things too difficult for me. This matter is clearly Li Zhen's malice in raising the price. How is my friend's fault? Why did you forcibly raise the price to 5 million? Those who don't participate in the bidding are not allowed to speak or would disrupt the auction. The purple-robed old man ignored Junimo Xie and spoke to Fatty Tang. Does young Master Tang have any objections? Tang Yuan, contrary to his usual arrogance, whispered, I didn't say much just now. June and Xie thought that this fatty Tang's courage had suddenly shrunk. Where was the arrogance and despotic demeanor from before? It was really strange. But how could he be willing to buy the Blazing Heart Meridian at the sky-high price of 5 million? That's bullshit *T. Moreover, it seemed that the magnificent Jewel Hall was deliberately making things difficult for him. With June Moxie's arrogance, how could he suffer such a loss? He couldn't help but sneer. Is the magnificent Jewel Hall trying to force a sale? If Fatty Tang's words were accurate, then he would have only called out 500 at most. When did he say 5 million? If the magnificent Jewel Hall thinks it's okay, then let's make the deal at 500. Indeed, Tang Yuan had only called out 500 and had not even had the time to say 10,000 before his mouth was covered by June Moxie. Both sides unexpectedly froze for a moment, while Li Jun and the others revealed a happy expression. It was clear that they wanted to see June Moxie and Tang Yuan make a fool of themselves. Everyone in the hall was silent. On one side was the magnificent Jewel Hall, and on the other side was the June family. Suddenly, in the silence, another illusory voice sounded. The rules of the magnificent Jewel Hall cannot be broken. Since I've made a bid, then I'll count. That voice was illusory, yet it seemed to be everywhere. It was low, yet exceptionally clear, clearly entering the ears of everyone present. The purple-robed old man's complexion immediately changed. The magnificent Jewel Hall will never force anyone to buy or sell, regardless of whether the June family or the Tang family will set foot here again. Today's auction has already been established. Now, young Master Tang Yuan has placed a bid of 5 million taels. As soon as the mysterious man spoke, the purple-robed old man's attitude suddenly became tough. Even the calm hitman, June, couldn't help but change his complexion. He wasn't too surprised by the old man's unyielding attitude. 5 million taels of silver was admittedly a sky-high price, but he wasn't too concerned about it. What surprised him the most was the sudden appearance of that illusory voice. The person who had just spoken had a very high level of strength and was surprisingly on par with the heaven-ranked expert Yi Gahan. But why would such an expert make things difficult for Fatty? Or was he trying to make things difficult for himself? Strength was one thing, but June Moxie's arrogance did not allow him to swallow this loss. What a joke! This was 5 million taels of silver. Although the effect of the 500-year-old Blazing Heart Meridian was extremely great, it was the best medicine to treat Jun Wui's illness, and was worth more than its value. Not to mention 5 million taels of silver. Even if the price was doubled, Jun Daxiao would still be determined to get it. But the true value and the determination were two different things, and the fact that he was a spendthrift was another matter. In the current situation, if he was forced to sell it at a price of 5 million taels of silver, then regardless of whether the transaction was worthwhile or not, the suffocating feeling would be enough to suffocate him to death. Moreover, the magnificent Jewel Hall was obviously twisting words and forcing logic on him. What June Moxie hated the most in his life was people who used their power to oppress others. Of course, this matter was no exception. What rules can't be broken? Ha ha ha. If June Moxie was pretending before, at this moment he was really angry. He sneered and said, "If that's the case, then this young master will sit here every day to raise the price, and let your magnificent Jewel Hall earn as much as they want." What does young Master June mean by this? Can I understand that the famous June family of the Tianxiang Kingdom wants to oppose my magnificent Jewel Hall? The illusory voice was neither happy nor angry as it reverberated in the air, but the heavy pressure in the words made it hard for people to breathe. Everyone present looked at June Moxie with some pity. As long as this prodigal boy agreed, then the June family of the Tianxiang Kingdom would be in big trouble. This June Moxie really didn't know the difference between life and death. He even dared to provoke the magnificent Jewel Hall? Li Jun, Meng Haizhou, and the others were beaming with joy, although they had spent a lot of money today. But if this matter caused the June family and the magnificent Jewel Hall to become enemies, then even if they had to spend 10 times the price, it would still be worth it. Opposite them, Dugu Xiaoi anxiously stamped her feet and said, "This pig-head, how could he dare to openly oppose the magnificent jewel hall? What should we do?" Her anxiety was evident in her words. Beside her, Princess Raimo looked at her thoughtfully, and the worry in her eyes deepened. June Moxie became even more vigilant. The person who spoke was clearly deliberately trying to provoke the June family and the magnificent jewel hall into opposing each other. Could it be that the magnificent jewel hall and the June family had enmity? Thinking about it this way, June Moxie was even more careful not to speak nonsense. Who doesn't know how to speak empty words? You said that Tang Yuan said 5 million, but who in the audience heard it? How come I only heard the word 500? In addition, Li Zhan bid 3 million. Did the magnificent jewel hall ever think about whether or not he can come up with that amount? If he can't come up with that amount, then wouldn't that mean that his pocket is empty? You asked if the June family is opposing the magnificent jewel hall? Then, this young master would like to ask, is this a deliberate arrangement by the magnificent jewel hall to make money? As soon as June Moxie's words came out, everyone was shocked. This sentence was tantamount to saying that the magnificent jewel hall and Li Zhan had joined hands to cheat Tang Yuan of his money. This was a serious blow to the reputation of the magnificent jewel hall. Today, the magnificent jewel hall had indeed overlooked this point, and June Moxie had seized this flaw. Under the magnificent jewel hall's deliberate unfairness, June Moxie fearlessly jumped out and openly accused them. The hall suddenly became quiet. For hundreds of years, there had never been someone who dared to question the magnificent jewel hall. Today, everyone's eyes had been opened, and they had gained new knowledge. After a long time, the mysterious man lightly said, "This matter was indeed overlooked. This lord will investigate it." Although the voice was still calm, it showed that he was very reluctant. However, everyone could completely imagine the appearance of a man who was trembling with anger, and yet still spoke as if nothing had happened. June Moxie was startled again. The magnificent jewel hall had deliberately made things difficult for them, but now it was obvious that they wanted to throw the game. What was going on? First they made things difficult, then they reneged on their own words and went back on their words. How could such a strange thing happen? Perhaps there's an inside story that he was not aware of. After a while, the illusory voice sounded again. "Li family's young master Li Zhan, you just bid 3 million taels of silver. Can you take out the money?" Li Zhan was standing at the side watching June Mo Xie and Tang Yuan make a fool of themselves. He was rejoicing in their misfortune when he suddenly heard the voice calling out to him. Thinking quickly, he quickly bowed and said, "This junior did not dare to take credit for Tang Yuan's repeated attempts to disrupt the order of the magnificent jewel hall's auction." Li Zhen replied in a righteous manner. The voice impatiently said, "This lord did not ask you what your motive was. This lord only asked you if you have the 3 million taels of silver to bid." Li Zhen could not help but feel embarrassed. This junior does not have the 3 million taels of silver. But this junior was not angry at Tang Yuan for disrupting the auction. "I did not deliberately disrupt it. Bastard." The voice seemed to be unable to bear it any longer and coldly said, "Since you do not have enough silver, why bid?" The one who disrupted the auction was not the Tang family's Tang Yuan. It was clearly you. You have broken the rules of the magnificent jewel hall. Immediately expel this person from the magnificent jewel hall. The Li family's private box will be cancelled, and the Tianxiang Li family's qualifications to enter the magnificent jewel hall will be permanently revoked. As soon as he finished speaking, a few attendants immediately came up and directly lifted Li Zhen up, dragging him out. Li Zhen was normally an arrogant hedonist, but at this moment, he didn't resist at all. He didn't even have the chance to beg for mercy. His face was deathly pale, and his body was paralyzed into a pile of meat paste. June Moxie looked on with cold eyes and felt that something was wrong. This was obviously a display of anger and shame. Why did it turn out like this? Even if Li Zhen was wrong, it was not enough to deprive the Li family of the right to enter the magnificent jewel hall. He thought that after dealing with the reckless Li Zhen, the next ones would be me and Tang Yuan, but I would like to see how the magnificent jewel hall will justify itself. Even if you have 1,000 clever plans, this young master will ignore them all. At most, I will just deprive the June family of the right to enter the magnificent jewel hall. What's the big deal? Humph, if that's really the case, then the first thing I will do after I achieve the art of unlocking heaven's fortune is to burn the magnificent jewel hall to a crisp. Also, this matter was deliberately caused by Li Jun, who could not see that. The people of the magnificent jewel hall were not fools. Naturally, they were even more clear about it, but after making things difficult for him, their attitude suddenly changed drastically. At this time, they were dealing with Li Jun, obviously taking the opportunity to step down. Suddenly, June Moxie's heart was filled with a sudden realization. The reason for this strange situation is there someone who interfered? So the magnificent jewel hall changed their original intention. But who is this person? Who has such great power? Just as he was thinking, he heard the mysterious voice say, June Moxie, although this matter was caused by Li Jun, but you have insulted my magnificent jewel hall, you still have to give us an explanation. The voice was quite harsh. Obviously, the anger had not dissipated. June Moxie just had a moment of enlightenment, and his heart was calm, knowing that the other party was just trying to step down. Then, you have really found the right person. This young master's wings are still not fully grown. Naturally, I will let you step down beautifully. But when I achieve the Xianxi, the first thing I will do is to kill you and pinch the bastard who just spoke to me to death. June Moxie laughed and said, When did this young master insult the magnificent jewel hall, right? Li Jun maliciously caused trouble, and this young master was inadvertently deceived by him. The magnificent jewel hall's discerning eyes are like torches, clearly observing the minutest details, and finally found this black sheep and dealt with it. Not fearing the nobles, unyielding and unyielding, the magnificent jewel hall is really worthy of being called the magnificent jewel hall. This young master admires you from the bottom of my heart. Suddenly turning around, June Moxie loudly said, Do you see? The magnificent jewel hall auction house is really the most fair place in the world. The price is fair, the old and the young are honest, impartial and impartial. How could such a chamber of commerce not be admired? How could we not be ashamed of ourselves? This young master is incomparably proud to have such a righteous chamber of commerce in the Tianxiang city. Come, 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 let us all applaud together and cheer for the magnificent jewel hall. Finished speaking, June Moxie's face was full of sincere admiration and worship, and took the lead in clapping his hands, and at the same time loudly said, Why don't you all applaud? Don't tell me you have a problem with the magnificent jewel hall. If so, this young master will be the first to stand up for the magnificent jewel hall. Suddenly, the entire audience burst into thunderous applause. Everyone applauded while cursing in their hearts. Shameless, ah! Truly shameless, ah! This young master, June Moxie's shamelessness and the thickness of his skin makes us feel ashamed of our inferiority, ah! Only Dugu Xiaoyi's face was full of excitement, and her face was like a blossoming flower, vigorously clapping her hands, and finally felt relieved. The mysterious voice also quieted down and no longer made a sound. In an elegant room of the magnificent jewel hall, two white-robed middle-aged men were sitting opposite each other. One of the white-robed middle-aged men fiercely gritted his teeth. His face was full of depression, and with a slap of his hand, he smashed the table in front of him and said in a low voice, June Moxie, what crafty boy! This lord will not spare you. The other white-robed man closed his eyes, and with a look of disapproval, he frowned and said, This is something you shouldn't have done. How can you blame this boy? The white-robed man snorted and said with dissatisfaction, But this blazing heart meridian, I am afraid that Jun Wui. At this point, he suddenly stopped. Jun Wui? The other white-robed man suddenly stood up. What do you mean? The white-robed man snorted, closed his eyes, and no longer spoke. The other white-robed man stared at him for a long time and said, I don't care what grudges you have with Jun Wui, but he is now disabled, and his life is ruined. If you still want to deal with him, I will kill you. This sentence was said decisively and without mercy. It showed the determination to do what he said. The white-robed man, Lang snorted twice, turned his head, and no longer spoke. The other white-robed man, Lang looked at him and suddenly said, "In this auction, there was no blazing heart meridian, but suddenly this thing was added. What is the reason? Who gave you the blazing heart meridian? Why did you come to Tianxiang City to auction it?" The white-robed man, Lang rolled his eyes and said, "If you want to know, you might as well go back and ask the elders. Don't show me that interrogating face. Do you really think that I am afraid of you? Is it?" The other white-robed man's face was even colder. Is it she specifically asked you to give it to Junwui? Otherwise, why would the ninth elder come together?" The white-robed man was startled and sternly said, "What nonsense are you talking about? It's just a trivial Junwui. Is it worth sacrificing half of the ninth elder's strength?" "I did not say that the ninth elder had to be sacrificed. What do you mean by that?" The other white-robed man suddenly had a murderous look on his face. "Are you playing tricks? So what? The Jun family only spent 300,000 taels of silver to buy it, but it still fell into the hands of Junwui." The white-robed man snorted. "Your mother's fart. What's the use of the blazing heart meridian? Without an expert like Shun Xian, under the poison of the blazing heart meridian, Junwui will die faster." The other white-robed man trembled, and his eyes were sharp. "You despicable villain! I will kill you." "Enough!" From afar, an illusory voice came, very old, but strict. "You don't have to say any more." The two white-robed men looked at each other for a moment. Their eyes were sharp, like two swords clashing in the air. Finally, both of them let out a cold snort and sat down with their backs facing each other, ignoring each other. Chapter 96. In the hall, Jun Moxie was full of smiles as he cupped his fists and bowed in all directions. Thank you, thank you, thank you everyone for your support of the magnificent jewel hall. This young master feels the same and is infinitely honored. Now, this young master announces that the auction will continue. Everyone can freely bid. Haha. No need to be polite. Who do you think you are? Look at your words. You sound like the shopkeeper of the magnificent jewel hall. Truly despised to the extreme. Everyone cursed in their hearts. If white eyes could hit people, at this moment, Jun Moxie would have been smashed into pieces by the overwhelming white eyes. If contempt could hurt, then Jun Moxie would have been beaten black and blue by now. Finally, the mysterious man's voice did not appear, but another clear voice leisurely sounded out. The previous bid for the Blazing Heart Meridian was caused by Li Jun from the Li family. The bid is invalid and will proceed according to the original price. Sure enough, it was two people. Jun Moxie smiled in his heart. Presumably, these two people did not agree with each other. Well, the person who came later should be a bit stronger. The purple-robed old man's face changed again, and then he said helplessly, "The Blazing Heart Meridian, young Master Tang has already bid 300,000 silver taels. Is there anyone who bid higher than 300,000 silver taels?" Even after asking several times, no one answered. Now that such a big thing had happened, who would dare to offend Jun Moxie, who was not afraid of heaven or earth, and Tang Yuan, who was a super prodigal? So, 300,000 silver taels going thrice. Sold. Dang, the hammer fell. The purple-robed old man felt depressed in his heart. He had presided over auctions for decades, but this was the most depressing he had ever felt. The two prodigal sons had completely disrupted the auction. Something that could have been auctioned for millions of silver taels was only sold for 300,000. If the purchase price was deducted, it was almost equivalent to giving it away. Fatty Tang experienced great joy and sorrow, and for a long time, he did not understand what was going on. Finally, Jun Moxie's heart was calm, and he slapped this disgraceful guy awake. On the other side, Dugu Xiaoi curled her lips and said angrily, "There's really no justice in this world. Why did that guy succeed again? He actually managed to obtain the spirit grass at such a low price. How hateful! So annoying, so annoying." Although she was cursing him, Her two beautiful big eyes turned into crescent moons. It was as if she was laughing from the bottom of her heart, without the slightest bit of disgust. Princess Lingming looked at Dugu Xiao suspiciously. She saw that Dugu Xiao was suddenly in high spirits. She pursed her lips as she looked at Jun Mo Xie's hoodlum methods. However, she shook her head. There was no trace of disgust on her face. Instead, there was a look of appreciation. What was going on? Princess Raimu suddenly had an unimaginable thought. She could not help but be shocked. Xiao, you, don't tell me you've fallen for this playboy? Hearing this, Dugu Xiao's face instantly turned red. She wrinkled her delicate nose, stuck out her tongue, and explained with a flushed face, "When did I fall for that kind of debauchee? When did I fall for that kind of debauchee? Humph! I can't wait to hang him up in my room and beat him with a leather whip. He actually dared to steal this girl's meteoric iron. He's really bold. If I don't teach him a good lesson, how can I get rid of the anger in my chest? I'll find an opportunity to teach him a good lesson." She fiercely raised her eyebrows and gnashed her teeth. Princess Raimu's whole body felt weak. It's over, it's over. As a close friend of Dugu Xiao for many years, how could she not see that Dugu Xiao was acting tough on the outside, but weak on the inside? She was trying to cover it up. She was obviously very happy, but she still had to pretend to be fierce. However, anyone could see through her real thoughts at a glance. Thinking about how Dugu Xiao was originally depressed and distracted, but when she heard Jun Moxie's voice just now, she suddenly became lively. Everything seemed to be self-evident and pointed to only one possibility. However, this possibility was too unimaginable, and it was simply a nightmare, Sister Xiao Yi. Oh my God! Seeing that Dugu Xiao maintained her fierce expression for a short while, and then revealed her two little canine teeth, Princess Raimu became even more worried. "Xiao Yi, what should I say about you? Sigh, what's wrong with you, such a playboy? What's wrong with you?" Dugu Xiao happily snorted twice and blinked her beautiful big eyes. "It's because he's a debauchee that he needs to be taught a good lesson. Let him know how powerful this girl is. Humph, 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 he." She couldn't help but laugh as she spoke, and her eyes were full of longing. It was obvious that she was already thinking about how to teach Jun Moxie a lesson, and had a look of longing on her face. Princess Raimu became even more worried. This matter was no small matter. Even if Dugu Xiao were to blame her, she would still have to inform Great General Dugu Wudi as soon as possible. The only pearl of the Dugu family, and one of the most famous beauties in the capital, Dugu Xiao, and that Jun family's playboy? This what's going on. It's like a flower being inserted into cow dung. It's simply a waste of God's gifts. Not to mention anything else, but from the perspective of the royal family, the only grandson of the third generation of the Jun family, and the most beloved granddaughter of the Dugu family, this was an absolutely unacceptable result, and it was bound to cause a change in the court. So no, I must stop this matter. I can't let Xiao Yi be ruined in the hands of this playboy. Princess Raimu looked at Dugu Xiao with a complicated expression, and then looked at Jun Moxie, and secretly made up her mind. The Blazing Heart Meridian could be said to be obtained at the cheapest price. Jun Moxie was somewhat excited, but in his heart there was a burst of awe. Looking at the masters that he had met in his 2 lifetimes, there were few who could match up to these 2 hidden masters of the magnificent Jewel Hall. His current strength was not strong enough, and it would be difficult for him to match up to such a strong person. Next, eldest young Master Tang smoothly obtained what old Master Tang wanted, a volume of the Divine Wind Sword record. Jun Moxie only glanced at it twice, and then threw it to Tang Yuan without any interest. His heart was filled with infinite contempt. This kind of fancy swordsmanship, and you actually have a nerve to take it out for auction, and you actually spent 2 million taels of silver. However, the next moment, Jun Moxie's body suddenly shook, and his face revealed a trace of surprise. After obtaining the Blazing Heart Meridian, Jun Moxie concentrated his spiritual sense on the boxes of the 2 princes. He knew that there were no other people in the boxes except for these 6 people, and his heart felt strange. Unexpectedly, he found that the 6 people in the boxes had all disappeared. It could be said that it was quite abrupt, and they absolutely did not go through the main door. However, June Moxie was able to conclude that these 6 people did not leave the magnificent jewel hall. Could it be that there were hidden passageways in the boxes? The next moment, June Moxie's spiritual sense discovered that the cold In-Shi had just escaped and had mixed into the crowd of people in the hall. Looking at it, he found that even their clothing and faces had changed. Even if someone were to look at them face to face, they would absolutely not be able to recognize that these were the people who had just entered the boxes. 3 of them were gathered in the middle, and the other 3 were on the other side, clearly divided. Each and every one of them had the appearance of a rich man, but the occasional flash of light in their eyes made June Moxie aware of the tension and desire in their hearts. It should be that they were about to make their move. However, in this batch of goods, what was it that was worth the covetous eyes of these 2 assassin groups? Even the 2 princes were involved. June Moxie took the list from Fatty Tang's hands and looked at the items that had yet to be auctioned. Finally, his eyes stopped on the last item to be auctioned. 30 tendons of a level 6 Xian beast, white-horned bull. Xian beast tendons. This should be it. Apart from this, the rest of the items were all ornaments and luxury goods. There was nothing too practical, and the assassin groups would never want such things. What they wanted was something that could pose a fatal threat to a person's life. Among these items, only the tendons of Xian beasts met their requirements. However, why would they need so many tendons of Xian beasts? There was no reason for the assassins to switch to using whips to kill people, right? Could it be to make strong bows and arrows? Thinking of this, June Moxie's heart thumped loudly. If the tendons of a level 6 Xian beast were used to make the bowstring, then the power of the bow and arrows would at least double. However, although the power of such a bow and arrows was amazing, if the strength of a level 9 Xian cultivator was not enough, they would absolutely not be able to draw it. Because of this, if a silver Xian or gold Xian expert were to use this bow, then it would undoubtedly become an absolutely deadly weapon. Even if it was a Jade Xian expert, if they would be caught off guard, then perhaps they would also fall into the trap. And with more than 10 of these bows and arrows, it was believed that it would be enough to threaten a master like Tian Xian. It seemed that this must be the case. Sure enough, as soon as the tendons of a Xian beast were brought out, the 6 men who had just entered from the 2 princes' camps finally began to bid against each other, and the competition became even more intense. The price continued to rise, and in a short while, it had actually climbed to an unprecedented high of 5 million. At this price, the rest of the people who were participating in the bidding had all been driven away, but even if only the 2 sides were left to face each other, no one was willing to take even half a step back. After a tug of war, the price of the 30 Xian beast tendons had actually climbed to a high price of 13 million, and was finally obtained by the 3 assassins on the side of the second prince. This was almost the highest single item that had ever been auctioned in the magnificent jewel hall in recent years. Third young master, you see, this is only a batch of rank 6 Xian beast tendons. If it were 30 rank 6 Xian Dan, then I am afraid that the price would be several times higher. Third young master, you should now know how important the thing that my family lost was. Tang Yuan smacked his lips. That is simply a priceless treasure. Oh, June Moxie replied absent-mindedly. His eyes scrutinized the 3 assassins who had obtained the Xian beast tendons and quickly disappeared from the crowd. He could not help but feel a little anxious in his heart. Since the last time the other side had dared to kill him, they had even dared to do the same to his own grandfather. And now, with this batch of Xian beast tendons, they could make powerful bows and arrows. Even if his grandfather was a master of the Tian Xian level, it would still be enough to pose a considerable threat to him. Let's go. June Moxie stood up. His heart was still calculating. If he could track the goods or find out where they had ended up, then that would be ideal. Chapter 97. What a pity. June Moxie felt some regret in his heart. The last time the old man had sent him back, he had left due to an urgent matter and would only return after half a year. If he was here, he would have come in handy. His tracking skills could be said to be top-notch. As for now, Jun Moxie looked at the few bodyguards that were following him. In all honesty, these people were carefully selected by Grandpa Jun. 1 gold level Xian practitioner and 7 silver level Xian practitioners. Their strength could be considered quite good. At least in Tianxiang City, they would be able to protect Jun Moxie. If Jun Moxie needed their protection. But Jun Moxie clearly knew that it would be pointless for them to follow the 3 assassins. Even if they were lucky enough to catch up, they would turn into 8 corpses in a very short time. According to Jun Moxie, the 3 assassins were all at the peak of the gold Xian practitioners. What's more, they were assassins as a profession. Since the threat had been discovered, it must be thoroughly eliminated. Nurturing a tiger to bring calamity, that was something only a fool would do. What to do? No matter what, I must find a way to track them. At the very least, I must get my hands on those Xian beast tendons. Even if I can't get my hands on them, I must find a way to destroy them. After all, the consequences of these Xian beast tendons are too terrible. Jun Moxie's mind was filled with murderous thoughts. So, he naturally released a thick murderous aura from his spirit sense. And at this time, an extremely sharp pressure suddenly came crashing down, following the trace of killing intent that Jun Moxie had just revealed, aiming straight at him. This time, the target was very obvious. It was Jun Moxie himself. Moreover, it was very precise. Even Tang Yuan, who was beside him, was not affected in the slightest. This imposing aura was much stronger than that of the 2 mysterious figures who had spoken earlier. Jun Moxie was greatly surprised by this extremely powerful aura. This mysterious master from the magnificent Jewel Hall was definitely stronger than his grandfather, Jun Tian. Could it be that he was the legendary Shun Xian level master? Jun Moxie had even vaguely guessed the purpose of this coercion. Just now, when the 3 assassins had left the scene, his spiritual sense had fluctuated and followed the direction in which the 3 people had left, revealing a trace of involuntary killing intent. And it was this little bit of weak fluctuation, a trace of killing intent, that mysterious expert immediately sensed it. Due to the uniqueness of Xian, experts below the level of Tianxian were simply unable to use their divine sense to probe silently. That was why Jun Moxie had been so unscrupulous in using it. He hadn't expected that he would actually be caught red-handed this time. The cultivation of this mysterious person who had been hiding in the dark was very high. However, the magnificent Jewel Hall had always paid attention to the auction items. Since Jun Moxie was obviously following the assassins, it was not surprising that he was discovered, especially since this person's spiritual power was so strong. However, the only thing that Jun Moxie was sure of was that this person had only discovered his divine sense and was not certain that he was Jun Moxie. That person must have the same divine sense as him. And Jun Moxie firmly believed that his art of unlocking heaven's fortune was absolutely unique in this world. Therefore, he was confident that even though he had exposed his murderous aura, he had not. However, Jun Moxie could clearly feel this powerful coercion. His heart was in a dilemma. Looking at the momentum of this divine sense, if he did not resist it, he was afraid that his mind would be greatly damaged. But if he used his divine sense to defend or counterattack, although his own divine sense was more magical than the opponent's, it was far from being as strong as the opponent's. What should he do? While he was hesitating, the powerful divine sense was already approaching his body. At the last moment, the Hongjun Pagoda in the depths of Jun Moxie's sea of consciousness suddenly shone brightly. From its motionless state, the Hongjun Pagoda flew into the air and rotated at a high speed. In a flash, the 7 colored rays of light blossomed in Jun Moxie's sea of consciousness like a deluge of heavenly flowers. He slowly welcomed the powerful divine sense that was attacking him. That powerful spiritual sense rushed over like lightning. But the moment it came into contact with the aura of the Hongjun Pagoda, it was like a small snowflake had suddenly fallen into a red-hot stove and disappeared without a trace in an instant. Like a clay ox entering the sea, it disappeared without a trace, not even stirring up the slightest ripple. How could a mere supreme, divine, Xian mortal's energy compare to this kind of ancient treasure? The treasure left behind by China's #1 immortal? A mystical object that could split the heavens and split the earth. Even if all of the Shun Xians in this world were to join forces, it would still be a piece of cake for the mysterious Hongjun Pagoda. The Hongjun Pagoda slowly fell back to its original position. At the same time as it fell, Jun Moxie had also shut off his divine sense. But all of this, only the hitman Jun was aware of. Even the hidden expert who had been counterattacked was absolutely unaware of the mystery. In the underground chamber of the magnificent Jewel Hall, a plain-clothed old man was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. His body suddenly shook, and he opened his eyes. There was an incredulous look in his eyes, and his face was full of fear. Beads of sweat started to flow down his face. No matter what, he was someone who had already stepped into the ranks of the great Master Shinxian, but when his divine sense had pressed down on him, the person outside did not seem to have the slightest reaction and had effortlessly resolved it. It was as if his divine sense was nothing more than a speck of dust in the eyes of the opposite party, not even worth mentioning. What does this mean? The peak of the Shun Xian. Only an expert at the peak of the Spirit Xian realm will be able to defuse my divine sense attack so effortlessly. Moreover, I wouldn't be able to detect it. This is the only explanation for such a strange scene. The white-haired old man was so shocked that he blurted out, "How can there be such a person in the Tianxiang city? Could it be that something big has happened in the Tianxiang city recently?" However, the opposite party had only intended to resolve it, and had not made any counterattack against his divine sense. It seemed that he had no hostility towards the magnificent Jewel Hall, or perhaps he knew the true background of the magnificent Jewel Hall, Who was this person? No longer caring about shocking the world, the white-haired old man swept up from the praying mat, and like a wisp of wind, he chased after him. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, he had already chased out of the magnificent Jewel Hall and circled around like a faint mist. The next moment, he had already appeared on the roof of the magnificent Jewel Hall and was looking for something in all directions. After a long while, he shook his head in disappointment, and his body flashed and disappeared. However, he did not notice that at the door, he had just brushed past Jun Moxie. However, no one had actually seen clearly, nor had they noticed that the wisp of wind that had just blown past was actually a person. A super strong person. At the door, Jun Moxie was so scared that his whole body felt like he was drinking ginger soup on a hot day, and he was sweating profusely. In his heart, he secretly exclaimed, "It's really too strong." Little did he know that the old man's reaction was even worse than Jun Mocs. He recalled the feeling of helplessness when his spirit sense had been completely melted. It seemed as if he was being slaughtered by the opponent. The old man's entire body was drenched in sweat. Even his calves were cramping. He was almost moaning as he said, "It's too powerful." This kind of peak powerhouse appearing in the Tianxiang city is certainly an indication that an earth-shattering event is about to take place here. No, I must send this news back as soon as possible, the old man thought as he quickly walked towards his study room. After a moment, a strange and small snow-white eagle flew from the roof of the magnificent Jewel Hall and shot towards the distance like an arrow. The white-robed old man looked anxiously at the direction where the bird had disappeared, and after a long sigh, he turned around and went downstairs. Jun Moxie also let out a long sigh, and hurriedly urged Tang Yuan to hurry up. He looked back with lingering fear, and secretly decided that he would not come back to the magnificent Jewel Hall until he was satisfied with his own strength. His mother, there was actually the existence of Shun Xian. Did he really want to scare people to death? Not to mention the current him. Even when he was at his strongest in his previous life, he might not have been able to provoke him. What a terrible, magnificent Jewel Hall. Jun Moxie, a clear and melodious voice suddenly sounded from behind him. June Imo Xie turned his head and saw Dugu Xiao walking over with a fierce look on her face. She nodded her chin and said, "Ah, so you haven't, ah?" She had wanted to say, "So you haven't died." But as the words came to her mouth, she suddenly couldn't say them. It seemed that she was extremely unwilling to associate the word dead with June Moxie. Even if it was a joke, it was too unpleasant to hear and too inauspicious. "So it's Miss Dugu." June Moxie smiled and looked at her up and down. "I haven't seen you for a long time. Miss Dugu has become more and more beautiful, and it really makes my heart itch." Tang Yuan was shocked and couldn't help but want to turn around and run away. "My Uncle June, Ancestor June, how can your courage be so fat? You even dare to take liberties with this little miss? Could it be that you haven't been beaten enough before?" It must be said that among the people that June Moxie avoided, even his grandfather June John Tian could only be ranked second. This was because this ruthless little miss had occupied the first place for a long time. This matter, Tang Yuan was very clear about. However, the series of events that happened next made Fatty Tang feel as if he was dreaming even after he returned to his own home. He didn't wake up after listening to June Moxie's words. Dugu Xiaoyi unexpectedly didn't get angry. Instead, her pretty face turned red, and the fierce expression on her face disappeared. She shyly lowered her head and said in a low voice, "Really? Is it really better than before? I look in a mirror every day. How can I not feel it?" "What?" Tang Yuan groaned and staggered. He had seen a ghost in broad daylight. Or perhaps the person in front of him was not Dugu Xiaoyi, but her twin sister. June Moxie also broke out in cold sweat. He suddenly felt a little creeped out. What was this little miss playing at today? He nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. Yes. It must be the effect of losing weight. Then I will continue to lose weight when I get home." Dugu Xiaoyi jumped up excitedly. When she landed on the ground, she seemed to remember something. Her pretty eyes widened, and she said fiercely, "June Moxie, what did you just say? You dare to take advantage of me? Your brain must be flooded with water. You really have guts." June Moxie increasingly felt that this girl was a little abnormal today. What was going on? Why did she suddenly change her face? Did she want to live? At this moment, something squirmed in Dugu Xiaoyi's bosom, and a snow-white little head popped out. It had small ears, a small nose, a small mouth, a pink tongue, and a pair of moist eyes. It was indescribably cute, and its 4 tender red claws were clawing at something. It was actually a very small animal. Xian beast. "Oh my God!" Tang Yuan cried out in shock and widened his eyes. "An iron-winged panther's cub. Brothers and sisters, the monthly votes ranking is in danger. From dawn until now, it has been harassed no less than 100 times. This is too damaging to our evil monarch's prestige." The 3rd update was delivered in advance, and the 4th update was delivered at night. Haha, brothers, Feng Ling is exploding. Everyone's monthly votes should also explode. Chapter 98. Iron-Winged Panther, a level 7 high-level Xian beast. Able to fly upon reaching adulthood, its 4 claws are capable of crushing iron and stone. Agile, fast, and extremely intelligent. An adult iron-winged panther can easily rival a primary level Tian Xian expert. At its peak, an iron-winged panther can rival a level 8 Xian beast. Such a high-level Xian beast cub is even more difficult to find. Who would have thought that Dugu Xiaoyi would have one? But looking at its tiny body, it is obvious that it is a newborn iron-winged panther cub. The Dugu family was very generous. They were actually able to obtain such a rare pet for their daughter to use as a pet. And now, this tiny iron-winged panther cub is trying its best to crawl out of Dugu Xiaoyi's embrace. A pair of pitch-black eyes looked at June Moxie, and there was a look of desire in them. "Be good, little white, don't move. Big sister will feed you something good." Dugu Xiaoyi felt that it was strange. Ever since her father managed to get this little thing, she had fallen in love with it. And because it was separated from its mother at birth, the little cub's body is weak and does not like to move. It has always been nestled in her embrace. Why is it reacting so strongly today and wanting to come out? So, it is called Little White. June Moxie only glanced at it, smiled, and praised, "What an adorable little fellow." June Moxie has always had no love for wild beasts. After a perfunctory reply, he turned around to leave. After all, he still has to find a way to track down those mysterious killers. Seeing him turn around, the tiny iron-winged panther suddenly squeaked and anxiously struggled out of Dugu Xiaoyi's embrace. Its four pink claws scratched with all its might. Looking at the direction it was trying to go, it turned out to be June Moxie and June Daxiao. "This little fellow seems to like you very much." Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes widened in shock. Ever since she obtained this iron-winged panther cub, she has brought this little thing with her to eat, drink, and sleep. She has never seen it act affectionately towards her. Today is the first time she has seen June Moxie. Why is it reacting like this? How strange. But I don't like it. June Mo Xie frowned as he glanced sideways at this so-called high-level, 7th-level Xian beast and shook his head regretfully. Unfortunately, this little thing was really too small. If it could be doubled in size, then it would barely be enough to make a pot of stew. Displeased with June Moxie's words, Dugu Xiaoyi snorted. She hesitated for a moment, but seeing her little white's desire, she couldn't bear it anymore. Hugging the little body, she walked in front of June Moxie and begged, "Little White likes you so much, please hug it for a while. If you can make Little White happy, I will forgive you for taking advantage of me earlier." The closer June Moxie got, the more excited the little iron-winged panther cub became. It whimpered and stretched out its tender claws towards June Moxie, like a baby reaching out its little hands to be hugged by an adult. Its eyes were full of desire and joy. Hesitating for a moment, June Moxie sighed in his heart. With such an interruption, there was no longer any possibility of tracking down the assassins. Helplessly, he reached out his hands and took the cub. Once June Moxie was in June Moxie's arms, it immediately stretched out its arms and legs in satisfaction. It greedily inhaled a few breaths of June Moxie's scent, its pink little mouth letting out a satisfied hum. Its furry little head arched into June Moxie's arms and comfortably used his chest as a pillow. Unexpectedly, it was about to fall asleep. Looking at its appearance, it seemed like it had already made plans for a long time to live and work in peace and contentment. Watching from the side, Dugu Xiaoyi's pair of beautiful big eyes stared blankly. What was going on? Although this little thing was small, it seemed to know that Dugu Xiaoyi would be its future master ever since it arrived at the Dugu family and handed it over to Dugu Xiaoyi. Although it had yet to formally recognize its master, it no longer rejected June Mo Xie. On the contrary, it had never spoken to anyone other than Dugu Xiaoyi. Even Dugu Wudi, who had carried it back, was no exception. Why was it so intimate with June Moxie, whom it had just met for the first time? This was too abnormal. In fact, June Daxiao was also puzzled. He felt that this matter was a little mysterious. He helplessly looked at the little guy that was preparing to live in his arms for a long time. Smiling bitterly, he said, "Is this a Xian beast that will never change once it recognizes its master? Moreover, it's at the peak of level 7. Why is it easier to trick than a puppy? Rumors can't be trusted." Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red. She felt that she had lost face. Panting with rage, she took a step forward and was about to take the little guy away from June Moxie's arms. June Moxie was too hateful. She didn't mind him taking advantage of her, but he still made things difficult for her. Damn it. But something even more unbelievable happened. Seeing that Dugu Xiaoyi was about to take it away, the little guy suddenly opened its eyes wide. Its eyes were full of hostility, and it let out a series of whimpering sounds. It fiercely opened its mouth, which had yet to grow any teeth, to threaten her. At the same time, its tender little claws firmly grabbed onto June Moxie's clothes. It was unexpectedly unwilling to leave the embrace of this stranger whom it had just met. Dugu Xiaoyi hugged its body, but she couldn't pull it away. Its four little claws seemed to be fixed on June Moxie's body. Even though its body was being pulled away, its claws were still tightly holding onto June Moxie's clothes. Its mouth was letting out loud, squeaking sounds, and it was extremely unwilling to let go. Dugu Xiaoyi scratched her head. and looked at June Moxie in shock. Then, she suddenly said, "June Moxie, are you its mother?" June Moxie's face suddenly became full of black lines. What kind of nonsense is this? Am I its mother? Wouldn't that make me an animal? Not to mention that Dugu Xiaoyi and Tang Yuan didn't know what was going on. Even June Moxie himself was baffled. In fact, Master Da Xiao's body had the Hong Jun Pagoda. The purest aura of heaven and earth had already transformed his body into something extraordinary. In addition, the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune had given him a wonderful effect. June Moxie's body was filled with the purest aura of heaven and earth. Ordinary people and ordinary Xian beasts couldn't feel the purest aura of heaven and earth. But it was something that these high-level Xian beasts needed for their growth. Especially for these young high-level Xian beasts, it was the most irresistible and fatal temptation. It took a lot of effort to remove the little guy from its body, and 2 big holes were torn in its clothes. June Moxie ignored its anxious squeaking and threw it into Dugu Xiaoyi's arms. "I'll give it back to you. You must hold it properly." Dugu Xiaoyi hastily and carefully caught it. She stared at him reproachfully. "Can't you be a little gentler? What if it falls?" The little guy was held in Dugu Xiaoyi's arms. It anxiously squeaked and struggled with all its might. It kept moving towards June Moxie's side. Its eyes were moist, and it seemed as if there were tears in them. It looked very resentful. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart softened when she saw it. She was about to send it over again. June Moxie was startled. He jumped out of the way and stood far away. He awkwardly said, "It's getting late. I'll go first." He turned around and left. Dugu Xiaoyi angrily stamped her feet and muttered a few words. Suddenly, she rebuked Junior Leopard in her arms. "It's all your fault. Why are you so useless? Is he your mother or your father?" Junior Leopard innocently looked at her with his big eyes. Then, he suddenly lowered his head and looked at June Moxie's departing figure. He let out 2 low whimpers and listlessly leaned against her chest. He didn't have the slightest bit of energy left. All right. I'll bring you to play with him in a few days," Dugu Xiaoyi said. Junior Leopard was still very far away from the level of psychic ability. Naturally, he could not understand what she was saying and did not have any reaction. Instead, it was Dugu Xiaoyi herself who, after saying these words, suddenly felt a sense of joy in her heart. Then, she felt a wave of embarrassment. She did not know why either. Where's Princess Raimo? She came out with me. How did she suddenly disappear?" Only then did Dugu Xiaoyi realize that her sister had disappeared. She could not help but frown. She was very surprised and complained. "She did not even tell me that she left. That's too much." June Moxie, along with the guards, bid farewell to Tang Yuan and went in the direction of the June residence. After turning the corner, he found a sedan quietly parked in front of him. There were dozens of guards surrounding it, and the lineup was much stronger than the last time. In front of the sedan stood a proud, lonely, and even somewhat miserable figure, Yi Guhan. Princess Raimo was actually waiting for him here. So, it's Her Highness Princess Raimo coming personally? It's really a small world. We meet again. What a small world. June Moxie raised his eyebrows in astonishment. Yi Guhan's cold, electrifying gaze was directed at him as soon as he spoke. He couldn't help but frown as he listened to June Moxie's glib words. "June Moxie, I have a serious matter to discuss with you." Princess Raimo slowly came out of the sedan. Her face was cold, and her slender eyebrows were slightly wrinkled in disgust. Her face was cold and unapproachable. "You have a serious matter to discuss with me? Could it be that there's something improper? You have a favor to ask, and yet you're putting on such a face in front of me?" June Moxie cursed in his heart, but his face was overjoyed at the unexpected good news. "Fate has brought us together from thousands of miles away. Princess, please instruct me if you need anything. Whether it is a serious matter or not, I will do my best." Could it be that the princess has finally responded to my infatuation and wants me to be the prince consort? The heavens really pity me. The heavens follow my wishes. The heavens make fools of me. A series of nonsense came out of his mouth. Yi Gahan snorted heavily. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. He shouted, "How dare you? How dare you talk nonsense? How presumptuous! How dare you? How dare you talk nonsense? How presumptuous!" June Moxie was not to be outdone. He shouted back fiercely, "Who do you think you are? I'm here to discuss serious matters with the princess. Is there any room for a nobody like you to interrupt?" Of course, June Moxie would not recognize Yi Gahan. The person who left the deepest impression on June Moxie that day was this Yi Gahan. However, it was not because of his superb martial arts. It was because Yi Gahan actually praised the leader of the assassins who committed suicide. Good man. This extremely pedantic evaluation made June Moxie very disdainful of this person of the same trade in this world. Naturally, he had a deep impression of him and despised him. Yi Gahan's gaze focused on June Dashao. The surrounding atmosphere suddenly became abnormally heavy. A desolate atmosphere suddenly arose. This was the prelude to Yi Gahan's violent killing. Chapter 99. Uncle Yi, please calm down. Princess Raimu hastily tried to mediate. June Moxie was injured and Grandpa June had almost turned the capital into a bloodbath. If he was killed by Yi Gahan, the consequences would be unthinkable. Although Yi Gahan was a master of Tianxian, but even if Yi Gahan's strength was twice as high, if Junjian Tian wanted to deal with him, it would be a piece of cake. It was not worth it to lose his life for a debauchee. Princess Raimu took 2 steps forward and said to June Moxie, "Young Master Mo Xie, please come with me. I have something important to tell you." Yi Gahan followed closely behind her like a shadow, not leaving her side for even a moment. Obviously, he was not at ease with June Moxie. At this moment, June Moxie suddenly felt a familiar cold feeling in his heart, but it quickly disappeared. It was the aura of the assassins that June Moxie had locked onto in the magnificent jewel hall. June Moxie's heart stirred. How did they come here? They took the Xian beast tendon and didn't run away. Could it be that they want to assassinate the princess in broad daylight? However, he clearly felt the aura of the 3 assassins at the corner of the street. June Moxie had a feeling of hope at the end of the tunnel. He had thought that after these 2 delays, it would be impossible to track them. Who would have thought that they would bump into each other here by chance? This is the will of the heavens. Looking at the guards behind him, if these people were to follow, forget about tracking them, I'm afraid that they would not even be able to take 2 steps, and they would be tracked instead. Thinking about it, June Moxie's heart suddenly stirred, and he came up with a plan. Although June Moxie did not know why these assassins were here, since they had stopped, it was obvious that they had discovered Princess Raimu's convoy. There was no doubt about it. The reason why he stopped was probably because he felt the powerful aura of the Tianxian expert, Yi Gahan, and didn't dare to act rashly. "You guys wait here. I have some serious business to attend to with the princess." June Moxie said to the guards with a serious face, "I want to talk about love with the princess and have a private conversation. Don't disturb us when we're doing our business." Hearing these shameless words, the guard leader gaped at him for a while before he finally lowered his head and answered, "Yes, young master." He stuttered the 3 short words 3 times. In his heart, he secretly cursed. "You were talking about love with the princess? Young master, your skin is really thicker than the average person's. Look at her royal highness. Just scraping off the frost on her face would be enough to freeze you to death. I'm afraid that you're going to be abused because you don't want us to see you being embarrassed. We're not that bored. Why would we be interested in following you at such a time? Serious business? You really have the guts to say that. Since you were born, how many serious things have you done?" June Moxie followed Princess Raimu. In his mind, he could clearly feel that with every step the 3 of them took, the 3 assassins on the opposite side of the street had to take a step back. When they turned the corner, the 3 of them were already several tens of feet away at another intersection. But it seemed that this road was the only road they had to take, or for some other reason, they actually hadn't left until now. And all of this, Yi Gahan had obviously noticed. He sneered, although he could not feel that the other party was an assassin. From the fluctuations of the other party's spiritual power, it was obvious that they were high-level Xian cultivators. This was a fact that did not need to be doubted. Although he did not take these three people seriously, his right hand was already gently pressed on the hilt of his sword. As long as the other party made the slightest movement, Yi Gohan would immediately kill all three of them. This was related to Princess Raimu's safety, so Yi Gohan would not allow any mishaps to happen to himself. A Sky Shin-level powerhouse could run amok in the Tianxiang city without any misgivings. Jun Moxie, I want to warn you about one thing. Princess Raimu finally stopped in her tracks and stood at the corner. Her willowy eyebrows were slightly knitted, as if she was organizing her words. It seemed like she was having a hard time speaking. Your Royal Highness, please speak in person. I am all ears. Jun Moxie's back was leaning against the wall. He bent one of his legs and supported the soles of his feet on the wall behind him. His arms, one high and one low, drooped down. His head was tilted as he looked at Princess Raimu in a frivolous and sluggish manner. Yi Gohan looked at his unbearable appearance, which made him look like a homeless man on the streets. He could not help but snort in disdain and turn his head away. He would rather not look at this unsightly appearance. He sighed in his heart. Jun Tian was a hero, but his only heir was such a coward. This is really sad and lamentable. It seems that the Jun family's downfall is already set in stone. What a pity for this family's reputation of loyalty. Jun Moxie also snorted in disdain in his heart. You may be a Tianxian expert, but compared to me, you're still too inexperienced. You actually lack the least bit of vigilance. Young Master's appearance may look like a hooligan, but it also looks like a dog taking a piss. However, the foot behind him can allow me to react and make subsequent changes at any time. As long as I exert a little force, I can ensure that I can advance or retreat freely regardless of whether I'm ascending or descending. My two hands, one high and one low, will help me maintain balance in any situation. As long as my foot is still on the wall, even if Master Shin wants to kill me in front of me, I can still escape at the first moment. But look at you, a Tianxian expert. Don't you know that if this young master wanted to take Raimu's life in that moment when you turned around, I could have killed her 3 times in that instant? Arrogant idiot. There's even a bodyguard like this who thinks that he's doing his job diligently. This is really sad and ridiculous. Young Master Xia. Miss Dugu is my best friend, so Princess Raimu paused and bit her lower lip. She seemed to be in a difficult position, but for the sake of Dugu Xiaoyi's lifelong happiness and not to be ruined by this frivolous libertine, she finally said in one go, So, I don't want you to have too much contact with Xiao Yi in the future. Do you understand what I mean? This young master doesn't quite understand. Jun Moxie simply shook his head. Your Royal Highness is very knowledgeable, but this young master is a debauchee. I don't have such knowledge. Your Royal Highness's words are so vague and unfathomable that this young master really can't understand. Why don't your Royal Highness explain it clearly? Wouldn't that be better? Jun Moxie was speaking the truth, and he did not have any intention of playing dumb. If it was the original Jun Moxie, he would have immediately understood it. However, the current him, with his extremely slow EQ from his previous life, could not even tell that Dugu Xiaoyi had feelings for him. He was still feeling melancholy in his heart, wondering how he could avoid that unruly girl who could change her face at any time. It would be a miracle if he could understand Princess Raimu's hidden words. Young Master Xia, there's no point in playing dumb. Do you really not understand what I'm saying? Princess Raimu frowned and was very angry in her heart. Whether you understand or not, Xiao Yi is definitely not someone you can match. Today, I might as well make this clear to you. Don't pester Xiao Yi in the future, or else you'll be asking for trouble. Huh. Jun Moxie laughed out loud and squinted his eyes. Your Royal Highness, aren't you being too nosy? Could it be that you're a mother? Suddenly, he replied with an "oh," and his shoulders trembled as he laughed weirdly. So you're jealous? What? You? Pervert. Princess Raimu was so angry that her body trembled and her lips started to tremble. To an unmarried lady, what Jun Moxie said was the most vicious mockery, not to mention the fact that she was a princess. Girl, please understand the situation first. Who's pestering who now? Understand? Mother of asterisk her. Only those who have investigated the truth have the right to speak. Understand? You're a princess of a country, but you don't even understand such a simple logic. No wonder people say that big breasts have no brains, although your breasts aren't big. As he spoke, June Moxie stretched out his palm with a lewd smile, as if he was feeling something in the air. He smacked his lips and felt a little pity. Even a poached egg has no brains? What's wrong with you? June M.O. See, I didn't care whether she was a princess or not. What imperial family? What princess? In his arrogant and unruly heart, there was no difference between her and the daughter of a rich family. Moreover, Princess Ling Ming's request had already aroused his disgust. Me not being able to avoid the little girl is my problem. But you want me to take the initiative to avoid the little girl? You're ordering me to do something. These are two completely different matters. And this is what young Master June hates the most. Therefore, young Master June's heart was in a very bad mood at this moment. If not for the fact that he had misgivings about the big assassins of the Yi family, he would have already done a few things to Princess Ling Ming. What should I do? Do I need a little girl like you to tell me what to do? I can do anything, but I won't have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. Princess Raimu took a deep breath, and her eyes were piercingly cold. June Moxie, if you insist on doing things your own way, don't blame me for informing General Dugawudi about this matter. You should know better than me what the consequences will be, right? When that time comes, even Grandpa June won't be able to protect you, and no one will look good. You're scaring me to death. I'm so scared. June Moxie's face was full of fear, and he patted his chest. His voice was trembling, and his movements were very exaggerated. My heart is thumping, thumping, thumping. Suddenly his expression changed, and he said, Hurry up and tell him. Hurry up and tell him if it's too late. Men are very impulsive in certain aspects. Men are not women. Why do they need to be so good-looking? Hurry up and go. I'm here to thank Her Highness. Ha! June Moxie said unscrupulously. In his heart, he thought, I beg you to hurry up, and it would be best if you can make that girl Dugu Xiaoyi permanently grounded by her father, so that she won't come looking for trouble with me, and I'll be very grateful to you then. Good. June Moxie, your words are like the wind. Don't regret it when the time comes. Princess Raimu's tender body trembled with anger, and her pretty face had turned pale. She had warned him out of good intentions, for Dugu Xiaoyi's sake, and also for June Moxie's own good. The Dugu family wasn't afraid of June Moxie in case of trouble. Others might not dare, but if June Moxie were to do something unforgivable, then Dugawudi would grab June Moxie and kill him. In that case, the June family and the Dugu family would become mortal enemies, and the entire Tianxiang kingdom would be annihilated in a puff of smoke if the two military forces were to go to war. The two couldn't see eye to eye, and parted on bad terms. Both of them had a sneer on their faces as they parted. June Moxie tilted his head and muttered, You really have nothing better to do. There are senseless people everywhere, and you're not my wife, and you're telling me to pick up girls? You're a dog biting a mouse, and you're meddling in other people's business. Princess Raimu's lungs were about to explode with anger, and she stared at him with her beautiful big eyes, and her towering chest was heaving up and down violently. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood and didn't want to say another word and turn around to leave. She stomped her feet fiercely as she walked, and it seemed as if she was going to break through the ground under her feet. God knows if I'll die of anger or go crazy if I stay here for a while longer. It's really hard to understand such a despicable, shameless, filthy, and disgusting thing. How could Dugu Xiaoyi's heart be bewitched and actually fall in love with him? Yi Gohan's face was ashen, and he floated to the front of June Moxie. Ling Ling said, Trash like you, I've always disdained to lay my hands on you, but you're really too hateful. Today, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of Senior Duke June. I'll also let you know that not just anyone can be toyed with by you. He had been watching and listening from the side, and had long reached the end of his patience. To be able to endure until now before making his move, it could already be considered as a very cultured person. June Moxie's mouth twitched, and he sneered, Pay. Who do you think you are? To think that your mouth can represent an important minister of a country, a Grand Duke of the Empire? What a joke. His heart was filled with endless disdain towards this kind of person who would spout so much nonsense before making his move. Jun Moxie had long since defined him as an idiot, especially when it's an assassin. That's even more unforgivable. Yi Guhan's eyes widened, and he was so angry that his eyes turned blue. He raised his palm up high and was about to slam it down. He finally understood what Princess Raimu was feeling earlier. This kid was really asking for a beating. The Tianxian master is hitting someone. The Tianxian master Yi Guhan is bullying someone. Someone come quickly. Someone come quickly and see how the Tianxian master is beating up an ordinary person who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. It's truly captivating. Help me out. Before Yi Guhan's palm could land, Jun Moxie did not want to expose himself, but he also did not want to suffer a loss. A wise man does not fight when the odds are against him, and he had already shouted out. His voice was loud and clear, and the words he used were also extremely sharp. Yi Guhan's pale complexion, which had never changed for more than 10 years, instantly turned red. Half of it was angry, and the other half was flushed. Too shameless. Too shameless. How could a person be so shameless to this extent? It was simply outrageous. You? Yi Guhan's raised hand became pointing at Jun Moxie, and his fingers were trembling with anger. To a Tianxian master, this was simply unimaginable. After holding in for a long time, Yi Guhan actually squeezed out a sentence that was very classic in Jun Moxie's previous life. A person cannot be so shameless to this extent. Chapter 100. Princess Raimu called out from afar, "Uncle Yi, ignore him, let's go." Yi Guhan was so infuriated that he almost went mad from his peak condition. So, he disappeared from Jun Moxie's sight with a schwa sound. In fact, he had completely disappeared without a trace. He secretly decided, although this kid Xianqi is trash and his martial arts is unreasonably low, his mouth is really the most vicious in the world. It's better to stay away from him in the future. If I really die from anger one day, then I will really create a record in the history of Xian continent for a dignified Tianxian expert to be angered to death on the spot by a playboy. In such a short period of time, he didn't even make a move, not to mention getting injured. But he actually had the urge to vomit blood countless times. This kind of experience was something he had never experienced in his life. Even if his meridians went astray during cultivation, it was not as serious as this time. I'll be damned if I don't anger you to death, but I still have to thank you for solving this problem for me. Jun Moxie snorted twice as he watched Princess Lingming and Yi Guhan leave in a fit of rage. Then, he looked at the two empty streets and gave a strange smile. Exerting strength with his left leg, he leapt up with a schwa sound. He leapt up the wall with a so sound and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Princess Lingming continued to tremble all the way up to the palanquin. Her vision turned black as she gasped for breath. Her heart felt suffocated to the point where it felt as though her chest was about to explode. The maid beside her was scared out of her wits. She kept patting her chest and back to soothe her. After a long time, she finally calmed down. She felt weak all over, as if she had just gone through a great battle. This was the first time in her life that she had been angered to such an extent. She had an urge to tear Jun Moxie's corpse into 1,000 pieces. Take a detour to the solitary residence, Princess Raimu ordered. Yi Guhan's face turned black, then white in an instant. Then it turned red, and then black again. It seemed as if he was performing a face-changing performance. The only regret was that he only had 3 colors, red, black, and white. If he had a few more colors, then he would have become a master of face-changing. The anger rising from his body seemed to have the urge to destroy everything. His eyes stared straight ahead like a burning volcano. The 8 guards of the Jun family looked at Jun Moxie apprehensively, and their hearts were filled with worry. Why is the princess and this person here? But my young master is not here. Also, young master was shouting just now. What was going on? This person couldn't have beaten the young master to tears, right? Although he could feel the terrifying aura coming from Yi Gahan, he knew that it was best not to provoke this person at this time. But after hesitating for a long time, his desire to protect his master prevailed. He finally mustered up the courage to open his mouth and ask, "Your Excellency, I wonder if my young master, get lost." Yi Gahan's eyes were bloodshot. His long white hair stood upright and pierced into the sky. He was so angry that he leaned against the railing and let out a long and majestic roar. It shook the heavens and the earth a few times. The faces of the people in front of him changed color. Their hearts were beating wildly, and they couldn't keep their footing. This showed the strength of Tian Xin's master. His anger had finally been vented. It had exploded and poured out in torrents. If he didn't vent it out, he was afraid that he would suffer internal injuries. A long and loud roar shook the entire city. Countless experts in the capital were instantly aware of this. Suddenly, a powerful spirit consciousness soared into the sky and hovered over the capital. Everyone was very curious. The aura of the master who let out this roar was so strong that he was at least at the peak of the Earth Xian level. What could have made such an expert so angry? The anger contained in this roar was so strong that it could burn the heavens and the earth. This was something that everyone could hear. At the entrance of the small tavern, Old Song suddenly opened his muddy old eyes. There was a look of astonishment in his eyes. Why does this sound like Xiao Ye's? The guards watched as Yi Gahan and Princess Raimu's carriage left. Then, they rushed over and saw that the carriage was empty. Their young master's shadow was nowhere to be seen. They couldn't help but complain. Did this strange guard kill the young master? Did he even destroy the evidence? Jun Moxie nimbly sneaked out from the shadows like a shadow, moving at high speed through the alleyways. His senses had long since spread out, closely following the group of assassins in black who were also moving at high speed. Jun Siem moved at a high speed, both his hands moving continuously. After moving for a distance of a few zhang, his face had completely changed. He now looked like a 30-something-year-old middle-aged man. His hair was exceptionally messy. There were countless people like this in the streets and alleyways of the imperial capital. Trying to find someone like this within the crowd was a very difficult task. After a few turns, Jun Moxie dashed out of the street. His footsteps seemed slow, but they were actually very fast. He quickly passed through a clothing store. His speed didn't slow down at all, but the white robe on his body had already turned into a navy blue commoner's clothing. The owner of the clothing store was oblivious to it. He was still happily soliciting customers. The assassins in front were obviously very cautious. After making several turns and detours, they changed their original clothes and dressed like ordinary businessmen. They walked eastward at a moderate pace, chatting as they walked. From time to time, bursts of laughter could be heard. They seemed to be chatting very happily. From the faces of the three, they also had the wretched expressions of men. From an outsider's point of view, they should look like they were talking about women. It was the standard look of a brothel customer. The standard of this assassin group was really not simple. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. In his previous world, any assassin would be able to understand this kind of disguise. However, in this world, these two people could actually do it so naturally. It was obvious that they were well trained. What was even rarer was that these two people had concealed their murderous aura so well that not even a drop of water could leak out. This was the truly brilliant part. If it wasn't for his spirit sense that could detect the coldness of the assassins, it would be almost impossible to track them. Or it could be said that apart from himself, no one else could use the same method to track them. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was a slight sound of water in front of them. There was also a burst of melodious sound of a silk pipe. There was also the faint sound of a woman singing. The faint smell of a woman's cosmetics spread out. It seemed that these assassins had arrived at their destination, the Spirit Fog Lake. Jun Moxie finally understood why these people had to pass through that street. That was the only way to the Spirit Fog Lake. If they were to change the direction, they would have to go in a big circle. But if it were him, he would rather go in a big circle. That way, he would have to go in a big circle. Along the way, June Moxie had already changed his clothes 3 times. Even his height and body shape had changed 3 times. The Tianxiang City, the Spirit Fog Lake, is a paradise for all men. There are countless beautiful women here, thin and fat, everything you could think of as long as you can think of it. It will certainly be here. Here, as long as you had enough money. You could do whatever you wanted. You could do whatever you wanted. You could do whatever you wanted. You could do whatever you wanted without any scruples. But if you don't have any money, then it's better to do it as soon as possible. Even middle-aged professional women who are as fat as Tang Yuan won't take a second look at you. Naturally, there were many legends in this world, such as gifted scholars and beautiful ladies, talented ladies from the brothel, and lovers. But legends were just legends after all. Legends were always very beautiful, but unfortunately, reality was unusually cruel. Many scholars from poor families thought that they were handsome and talented, so they came here with the appearance of a romantic scholar, trying to compose a fairy tale of a talented scholar and a beautiful woman. They were full of the hope that they would meet a beautiful woman who would fall in love with them at first sight, and fantasize that they would be able to jump up and rely on their talent and face to live off a woman. But unfortunately, after the pitiful few copper coins in their pockets were emptied, they were mercilessly thrown out one after another. Some were even thrown into the Spirit Fog Lake and drowned half to death. It was very disgraceful. This reminded them that although the legend was something that people yearned for, but if you didn't have enough money in your pocket, the legend would only send you to your death. Moreover, you would die a muddled and useless death. What kind of place is a brothel? As the saying goes, prostitutes are heartless, and entertainers are unrighteous. Brothels are the place where the former are the most common. Which man who comes to a brothel is willing to keep his chastity for his wife? Coming to a brothel and pretending to be a love saint is even more disgusting than being a prostitute. How could the women of the brothel, who are accustomed to the fickleness of the human world, not see the evil intentions hidden under the gentle and refined appearance of these so-called gifted scholars? This kind of dream is better not to have. No wonder Tang Yuan once said that if you see a bad guy, you will be able to kill him with a single slash, but if you see a hypocrite, you will continue to torture him until his spirit collapses. These words have deeply resonated with my heart. June Mo stuck close to the wall to conceal himself, leaned against the tree to conceal himself, and stroked the grass like the wind. He was obviously a living person, but he was like a shapeless shadow, and it seemed as if anything could become his cover. Not only did the 3 killers not notice him, but even the pedestrians on the road didn't notice him either. He only saw the 3 men in front of him, with a lustful and extravagant appearance, walking like nouveau riche into a very luxurious pavilion by the Spirit Fog Lake, Chong Pavilion. After their group entered, a nearby pleasure boat slowly glided over and stopped on the waterside of the Chong Pavilion, motionless. June Mo's heart skipped a beat. After looking around for a while, he saw that there was actually no one else on the boat other than the boatman. It seemed like he was waiting to receive someone. This situation seemed a little strange. Besides, the person had just entered, and the pleasure boat that had been parked on the other side had already approached. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? June Moxie clenched his teeth. I'll bet on this. A gentle breeze blew, and the reeds on the surface of the water fluttered in the wind, adding a dreamlike feeling to the dusk. It made everything in front of them seem so unreal. June Mo took advantage of the floating reeds, and his whole body seemed to melt into the reeds that filled the air. His body moved, and he quickly floated to a distance of about 30 meters. He took cover behind a thick willow tree on the shore and conveniently broke off 2 reeds. Then, he silently slid into the water. It was as if he had fallen into the water as a feather. In fact, he didn't even have the slightest ripple. This was because the young Master June had made great progress in recent days. In fact, he wouldn't have been able to achieve this much if it had been half a month ago. Chapter 101. Slowly sinking to the bottom of the lake, June Moxie opened his eyes. In front of him was the azure color of the water. After identifying the direction, he gently slid and dived towards the pleasure boat. Not long after, he felt his eyes darken and knew that he had arrived at the bottom of the pleasure boat. June Moxie quietly floated up, one hand clasping tightly to the bottom of the boat while the reed in his hand was in his mouth. With a breath of true energy, the long reed was extended to the side of the boat. A gust of extremely fresh air instantly passed into June Moxie's lungs, which were almost suffocating, and he immediately felt a sense of relief. If there were any mistakes in this series of actions, all previous efforts would be in vain, and it would also attract the enemy's attention. It might even lead to a fatal disaster. June Moxie did not make any further moves, but just waited quietly without the slightest bit of impatience. All the guesses and doubts in the past had now disappeared. He didn't care whether those assassins boarded the ship or not. Since he had chosen his target, he would never regret it. Intuition told him that this was the boat. Therefore, he had endless patience. As long as he could still breathe, he could continue to wait. Just like in his previous life, he relied on his intuition to track down and kill, or lurk, waiting quietly. At this moment, he was that king of killers again. Evil monarch. After a long time, there was finally a sound. A few women's laughter and a man's rough voice sounded, talking and laughing along the way. The boat slightly swayed, and above June Moxie's head, thumping footsteps sounded. Several people walked onto the boat one after another. 1, 2, 6 people. June Moxie silently counted. And there were 3 more than before. If the 3 killers from before had all arrived. As soon as the killers arrived on the boat, the unique, gloomy, and cold atmosphere immediately caused a reaction in June Moxie's mind. In this ice-cold water, feeling that gloomy and cold, killing intent, June Moxie suddenly had a subtle feeling of familiarity and nostalgia. This was his own world. The life of an aristocratic family was luxurious and comfortable. But June Moxie, the king of assassins, yearned for freedom. He wanted to be like the wolf king of the great prairie, roaring proudly across the world. Although danger lurked in every corner, he was still the king of the world. That kind of pain contained excitement, and he enjoyed loneliness and solitude. He ventured alone to the ends of the world, holding his sword in front of his chest and staring coldly at the heavens. 10 steps to kill a man, 1,000 miles unstoppable. This was June Moxie's biggest dream. But unfortunately, with his identity in this world, the possibility of June Moxie having such a chance was extremely slim. After the 6 people entered the cabin, they could only hear the sound of teapots and teacups gently touching, followed by the sound of several people drinking tea. No one spoke, only a few women chuckled from time to time, speaking softly and tenderly. After a long time, a hoarse voice sounded. "Monsieur, when will Lord Liu be able to come? It's not a good idea for my brother to wait here." The assassination attempt on the princess last time was a serious crime. The entire city is still searching for him, and the wind hasn't even slowed down. And now, we are carrying this Xian beast tendon, which is hard to buy even with 10,000 gold coins. It's also something that people covet. In case this... A woman's voice softly laughed and said in an indifferent tone, "Lord Zhao, you're worrying too much. This is the Ni Chong Pavilion. Don't tell me you don't know what kind of place the Ni Chong Pavilion is? The Ni Chong Pavilion is naturally safe, but it's better to be safe than sorry. The previous assassination attempt caused the entire city to be in a state of panic, and we had no way to retreat. We've already been delayed for a long time, and now we have this Xian beast tendon with us. It's not a good idea to stay in Tianxiang for a long time." The man surnamed Zhao seemed a little embarrassed as he said in an embarrassed tone, "Lord Zhao, I'm afraid you want to leave as soon as possible, but I'm afraid it's not because of the government's search. What about the failure of the last mission? Could it be that Lord Zhao intends to shirk his responsibility?" The woman's words were full of sarcasm. However, Lord Zhao only snorted in a low voice and didn't open his mouth to refute. Instead, another man angrily said, "Miss Yuer's words are wrong, and you're deceiving us. How can we be responsible for the failure of the last mission? If it weren't for your inaccurate information, how could we have been defeated? If we had known that the princess had a Tian expert as her bodyguard, how could our organization have made such an arrangement? How could the mission be a trifling level 3 mission? With the strength of our previous plan, to kill the princess under the protection of a Tian expert is undoubtedly a lunatic's ravings. Even if it's the second master, he has to give an explanation to our home master for this loss. The woman was silent for a moment, and then slowly said, "You've all received money. Isn't it a fact that we asked you to kill a silver Xian-level princess? Moreover, we've expended a lot of effort to divert the majority of the strength of the princess away, and it can be said that we've created the most convenient conditions for you. If you're still unable to succeed, then this seems to be your own problem. As for the so-called Tian expert, let's not talk about whether or not he has such a person. Even if he does, it's already your problem. We've already paid enough money, and all we want to see is the result we want, and not the so-called reason to shirk responsibility." After a pause, the woman could clearly be heard standing up and slowly pacing back and forth. Her voice was low, but clear and clear. "This servant is but a little girl. There's no point in telling me about this matter. Don't be impatient. Wait for Lord Lu to arrive, and you can tell him." She sat down on a chair and picked up her teacup without batting an eyelid. For a moment, the atmosphere in the cabin was incomparably awkward. The assassins had all suffered this kind of humiliation. Seeing the woman's sophistry, one of them immediately snorted angrily and was about to flare up. But at this moment, the bow of the pleasure boat slightly moved and 2 people walked in. June Moxie, who was crouching at the bottom of the cabin, felt that the atmosphere in the cabin had suddenly become dignified the moment these 2 people entered. Presumably, these 2 people were people of great status and were certainly first-rate experts. June Moxie only felt that the scene in front of him gradually darkened, and it was already night. On both sides of the Spirit Fog Lake, lights of all colors were reflected on the surface of the water. "What's going on?" The newcomer saw the strange atmosphere in the cabin and asked in a deep voice. His voice was very dignified. His tone revealed the bearing of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. "Darren Liu, our Bloodsword Hall needs an explanation for the assassination the day before yesterday." The leader of the assassins, with a hoarse voice, said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Why has no one ever mentioned that there was another Tian expert guarding Princess Raimu? This matter caused the complete annihilation of our organization's manpower. It can be said that the loss is enormous, and this is something that has rarely happened in our Bloodsword Hall in recent years." "Oh, does Hall Master Zhao mean to say that the assassination mission was not completed and is instead blamed on us?" That Darren Liu was neither fast nor slow, and his tone seemed to contain a bit of a smile. "Then, the prestige of the Bloodsword Hall will be discounted." The leader of the assassins said in a hoarse voice, "Darren Liu, you are also a first-rate expert. What does this matter have to do with the prestige of our Bloodsword Hall? Our Bloodsword Hall has always accepted people's money to eliminate disasters. No matter who it is, we will kill them without hesitation. However, the execution of the mission has always been based on the accurate information provided by the employer. Then, the difficulty of the mission can be determined, and the corresponding manpower will be sent to kill in one blow." He spoke passionately here, but June Moxie, who was below the cabin, almost despised him to death. As an assassin and a member of a long-established assassin organization, how could he believe the employer's information? This was the biggest joke in the world. Even if the employer's information was absolutely accurate, the assassin organization and the assassin himself would still need to verify it in detail. Believing the employer was tantamount to taking one's life as a joke. That person continued to say, "But now, in the matter of Princess Raimu, whether you concealed or overlooked the extremely important fact that there was a Tian expert, if Hall Master Darren had known that there was a Tian expert involved, how could you have only sent 2 insignificant gold-ranked assassins? I'm afraid that Hall Master Darren would have personally taken action. The reason for this is because of your inadequate information. How can you blame our Bloodsword Hall? Let's not talk about other things. This assassination absolutely cannot be classified as a level 3 assassination. His words were very fierce, and his tone was also quite impolite. However, Lord Lu surprisingly did not get angry. He pondered for a long time before saying, "Are you sure? That person is really a Tian Xin expert?" "Absolutely." The leader of the assassins nodded with great certainty. "Not only that, I heard that the Tian Xin expert's flying knife was as blue as the sea and sky. It must be the peak of Tian Xin's cultivation. Moreover, the flying knife was filled with Xian Qi, but when he attacked, it was light as a feather without any power. The intention was probably to deter. This kind of controllability is almost at the level of the legendary supreme Shun Xian's control. This Tian Xin expert, I dare to guarantee that although this person is at the peak of Tian Xian, he has already taken one step into the threshold of supreme Shun Xian." The more the leader of the assassins spoke, the more he rejoiced. Fortunately, he did not personally participate in this operation. Otherwise, he would have already become a cold corpse. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he had truly taken a trip to the gates of hell. The more he spoke, the more fear he felt. In his heart, his opinion of this Lord Lu in front of him increased. In the end, the expression in his eyes became somewhat strange. Did he trick us to come here to die? Tian Xian peak expert. Lord Lu stood up and paced back and forth. He frowned and muttered to himself. When did such a person appear in the palace of the capital? Why are they also? It is really strange. Extremely strange. Lord Lu, may I ask how this matter should be resolved? The assassin in black saw that he did not speak for a long time and could not help but ask. HM? Oh, since this matter is absolutely true, then this matter must be reported back to Second Master, and then we can make other plans. Lord Lu muttered. With the protection of a Tian Xian expert, a normal assassination would no longer have any effect. He raised his head and looked at the three people in front of him. Although he did not say anything, the meaning behind his words was clear that these people were no longer of sufficient weight. Lord Lu is right. We also know our own limits. With such a Tian Xian expert around, it is impossible for us to assassinate the princess. The leader of the assassins suppressed the anger in his chest and said, "However, people who can't even obtain information, don't they seem to be of no use?" "Oh, ha ha ha." Lord Lu stared blankly for a moment before laughing loudly. Then he changed the topic and said, "However, you didn't even manage to kill June Mosia. It's a pity that such a good opportunity is lost." Chapter 102. What a pity. What a pity. It would be great if June Moxie died. It would have made June Moxie's heart ache for a while. Lady Yu said while gnashing her teeth. She seemed to be extremely regretful when she heard that June Moxie hadn't died. June Moxie, who was in the cabin, carefully searched his mind. He was very puzzled. He didn't remember offending this Lady Yu. So, why does this woman's tone sound as if she had been raped by June Moxie 100 times? Lord Lu pondered for a moment and then said, "This matter has already reached this point. So, I'll put an end to the matter of hiring you to assassinate the princess for the time being. Moreover, I've successfully obtained the Xian beast tendons. So, I'll try to arrange for you to leave Tianxiang City. Haha. As for the rest of the matter, I will report back to Master and see how he will arrange it. Perhaps he will cooperate with your noble hall again. I will trouble you to send my regards to the Bloodsword Hall Master when you return. Also, I will say this. Although this matter has failed, the Second Master is still very grateful." When he said the last sentence, his voice suddenly became extremely solemn. Obviously, these were the words of the so-called Second Master. June Moxie silently curled his lips. Who doesn't know that the so-called Second Master is the Second Prince? Why do you all look so mysterious? Thank you, Lord Lu. I will certainly convey your message. As for how to leave, we have other ways. We will take our leave now. Then, The three men stood up and cupped their hands in salute. The Xian beast tendons have been placed in the hands of Lady Yu. 30 tendons are not a small number. We will come back to take back what belongs to us. Lord Lu chuckled and said, "You're welcome. When you return, I would like to ask if the Hall Master has considered the matter regarding the assassination of a certain emperor. No matter what the result is, please inform us as soon as possible. I'm counting on you." Yes. The three of them filed out and disappeared into the night in a flash. Lord Lu and the others did not go out to see him off. Lady Yu, after that incident, the palace has already undergone a major purge, and the three of you have lost quite a bit of manpower. However, this is not a big deal to us. After all, no matter how one looked at it, this matter was caused by boss's people. So, you have to finish what we agreed on as soon as possible. Once the news spreads, arrange as many people as possible to go in. Remember, it must be one-way communication. Lord Lu lowered his voice and said hurriedly, "Yes, Lord Lu and Second Master can rest assured about this. We have prepared for a long time, and the ones we have chosen are all virgins." Lady Yu's gentle voice sounded, "Gidge, Lord Lu, if not for Second Master's important matter, even you would like to go to the palace to play for a few days. Haha, with Lady Yu's outstanding beauty, who could resist your temptation?" Lord Lu laughed and lowered his voice. "Second Master has instructed us to make crossbows with Xian beast tendons as soon as possible. They may come in handy at any time, and cannot be delayed for even a moment. This matter is very tense at the moment, and all parties are watching us. So, it is not convenient for us to come forward. Everything is in your hands now." Lady Yu replied in an embarrassed manner, "Of course I know this, but these Xian beast tendons are too rare. If we use ordinary steel as the material, I am afraid that it will not be able to make the best use of them. But we cannot find the divine weapon catalog in the capital to make them. Although the divine weapon catalog is excellent in craftsmanship, it is a pity that a tall tree attracts the wind. The only one that can do this business is Jiangnan's Zhao Trading Company. I have already sent people to contact them before the auction, but I have yet to receive a response. Well, the sooner this matter is settled, the better. I would rather pay double the salary, but it must be done as soon as possible." Lord Lu cautiously said, "This kind of thing will be of great use to us in the future. Second Master has spent a sky-high price, and even took a great risk to ask the Bloodsword Hall to exchange for these Xian beast tendons. We cannot afford to have any mishaps. This subordinate is naturally aware of this." Lady Yu smiled gently and said, "Lord Lu, I do not know what the outcome of the matter that I asked Second Master for." Lord Lu's tone was quite difficult as he said, "Lady Yu, that Junjian Tian is the pillar of Tian Xiang's military. It is easier said than done to assassinate him. Even the Bloodsword Hall's Hall Master, a person who dares to assassinate a princess and a prince, is still hesitating on this matter. If we use Second Master's men to frame Junjian Tian for treason, it will definitely be effective since His Majesty is furious after Junjian Tian's ruckus in the capital." Lady Yu's tone was extremely resentful. "Even in my dreams, I dream of Junjian Tian's family being destroyed. This is obviously an excellent opportunity. How can Second Master let it go so easily?" "That will not do." Lord Lu flatly rejected this proposal. "If we make a move against Junjian Tian, at least half of Tian Xiang's military will be mobilized. We can target Junjian Tian himself, but we cannot target his men. Second Master does not want a fragmented Tian Xiang kingdom. That Junjian Tian has caused the destruction of my country and my people. Hearing you say this, could it be?" Lady Yu's tone was somewhat disappointed. "If Second Master cannot do this for me, then why should we rely on him?" "How dare you?" Lord Lu sternly scolded, and then immediately slowed down his tone and said, "Lady Yu, this matter cannot be rushed. The Bloodsword Hall is currently hesitating. Wait until they have finished their business in the Yutang Empire, and the leaders of the Bloodsword Hall will meet. At that time, Second Master will certainly have a way to make them submit. The three leaders of the Bloodsword Hall all have the cultivation of Tian Xian, and are the most mysterious leaders. It is said that they are super experts on par with the supreme Shun Xian. Dealing with a mere Junjian Tian is definitely not a difficult matter. Besides, Junjian Tian is already at the end of his life. What's wrong with letting him linger on for a few months? Lady Yu snorted, still somewhat indignant, but did not utter another word. Jun Moxie's heart shook. They are actually planning to assassinate my grandfather. As for the assassin organization, the Bloodsword Hall, the three leaders were all at the Sky Xian realm, and they even have the Supreme Shin Xian as their leader. However, due to the fact that he was in the water, the originally tranquil surface of the lake couldn't help but let out a slight splashing sound. Although the sound was so soft that it could not be heard, Jun Moxie immediately felt that something was wrong. Who? He only heard a stern voice. There is someone under the boat. His tracks have been exposed. Jun Moxie did not have much time to think. His body turned around, and his feet fiercely stomped on the bottom of the boat. His whole body suddenly shot out from the bottom of the water like a huge swordfish and rapidly swam into the distance. With a loud bang, the top floor of the pleasure boat was torn apart. A figure with a golden body mixed with a faint yellow light soared into the sky and flew 50 feet high. His eyes were like thunder and lightning as he swept around and found the figure of Jun Moxie, who was rapidly moving away from the bottom of the water. A golden light flashed, and he landed back on the boat. Then he grabbed the boat's long bamboo pole, and with a schwa sound, it flew out of his hand like a black lightning and shot towards Jun Moxie's figure under the water. At the same time, his body flew high into the air and followed the direction of the bamboo pole. His clothes fluttered in the curtain of the night, and his body flickered with a golden light, as if a deity had descended to earth. It was Lord Liu, the peak of the gold level. Just half a step more, and he would be at the Earth Xian level. Jun Moxie swam away like a flash of lightning, and suddenly felt a heavy pressure on his head. The water around his body seemed to have suddenly solidified, and at the same time, he felt a huge sense of danger enveloping him. In a split second, his hair stood on end. Without even turning his head, Jun Moxie could clearly feel that this danger was aimed at his back. If he couldn't avoid it, there would definitely be a big bloody hole in it. At that time, he would probably have to go through another transmigration, if he still had that kind of luck. In a flash, he mobilized all the power in his body, and the art of unlocking heaven's fortune was fully activated. Suddenly, he felt the pressure on his body decrease, and his body leaned to one side. His chest stuck out, and his buttocks protruded. His waist suddenly bent, and his whole body became disjointed and became a standard shape. What a devilish figure, with the curves of the front and the back. Schwa, the bamboo pole, which was more than 4 feet long, almost brushed past Jun Moxie's skin. It pierced through his clothes and even his underwear and stuck deep into the mud. Jun Moxie only felt a chill on his thigh and a sharp pain, and a few curly hairs suddenly floated into the water. If the bamboo pole had deviated by half an inch, perhaps Jun Dashao would have had to serve His Majesty the Emperor. Suddenly, his scalp went numb. An ordinary bamboo pole was only 2 feet long, but the Spirit Fog Lake was deep, and the bamboo pole was relatively long. Jun Moxie struggled, but the bamboo pole was stuck between his clothes and his skin, and unexpectedly did not move. With a flip of his right hand, a small flying dagger appeared in his hand, and with a chi sound he was freed. The 2 pieces of his robe were like 2 butterflies, and in the middle was a white body. If it was a woman, it would be very attractive. In the sky, the figure emitting a golden light was swiftly and violently swooping down. Before he reached the surface of the surface of the water rippled, and the calm surface of the water sank deep, forming a whirlpool. Even a bamboo pole that was stuck deep in the mud was exposed. Jun Moxie was at the bottom of the water, and his eyes were wide open as he looked at the figure swooping down from the sky. He snorted in his heart and suddenly straightened his body and fiercely rushed up. Ah, don't worry, I am not rushing up to fight with this Gold Xian Peak expert, who is still an insurmountable mountain to me. His body rose like an arrow, And in the instant that he was about to break the surface of the water, he suddenly pushed with his left hand, and a water arrow shot out, shooting towards the figure in the sky. His other hand grabbed the bamboo pole, and his body dropped 1,000 caddies. At the same time, he rapidly swam in the opposite direction and activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. With a wung sound, the bamboo pole, which was as thick as a calf, was unexpectedly pulled into the shape of a bow and issued a caw-caw sound, which made one's teeth ache. When the pole was bent to the extreme, June Moxie's accumulated strength was exhausted, and he suddenly let go, and his naked body swam away at an extreme speed. Chapter 103. June Moxie had already figured out that this person threw the bamboo pole. Firstly, it was to kill him, but there was also another intention. That was in case the throw failed to kill him, he could use it as a foothold. This could be seen from his falling posture. Although he was falling fiercely, he was falling with both feet. If it was an ordinary expert in this situation, they would usually fall head down and feet up. That way, their speed would be twice as fast as this person's current speed. This also meant that this Lord Lu, this high and mighty peak gold-level expert, did not know how to swim. This was what June Moxie had analyzed in that instant. Therefore, he immediately chose to pull the bamboo pole to the side. As long as he pulled the bamboo pole away, he would have nowhere to borrow strength after falling down. Then, even if he drowned, he would not be able to catch up to him. But June Moxie did not expect that not only was the bamboo pole very tough, the mud at the bottom of the lake was also deep enough. He could not pull it out and could not break. Seeing that the person was about to fall, he could only let go and swim away naked. His naked body was like a big white fish with a bit of jet-black water grass in its mouth that Lord Lu had already planned out. This eavesdropper only knew how to escape, so he was definitely not a powerful character. He could deal with him. Although he did not know how to swim, with the bamboo pole as a foothold, he could attack or defend. If it really did not work, he could just turn around and return to the boat. Therefore, he did not have any scruples. The moment the bamboo pole left his hand, a water arrow shot towards him. Lord Lu waved his sleeves and immediately swept it to the side. This way, he could easily test the opponent's strength and felt more at ease. But who knew that when he neared the surface of the water, he swept his eyes around and found that the bamboo pole head that was just flashing in front of him had actually disappeared. This caused him to panic. His body was in the air, and his strength had already been exhausted. Like a moth flying into a flame, he fell into the water with a splashing sound. Just as he fell into the water, before he could regain his senses, he saw two big white buttocks not far in front of him slipping into the depths of the water. He could not help but be furious. Right at this moment, he suddenly felt a change in the flow of water in front of him. With a buzzing sound, a long bamboo pole rapidly bounced back along with the turbulent flow of water. If he knew how to swim, he would naturally be able to dodge in time. However, he didn't know how to swim. He was flustered when he fell into the deep water. How could he care about these things? With a paw sound, the bamboo pole hit him hard between his legs. Before he could let out a heart-wrenching scream, his body instinctively bent over. Then, the head of the bamboo pole hit his forehead with a bang. With a blood-curdling screech, Lord Lu was smashed into a somersault. Under the tremendous force, he flew out of the water with a splendid splash of blood. Like a dried salted fish, he flew straight towards the direction of the pleasure boat. The last remnant image in his mind was actually that pair of big white buttocks swaying in front of him. Really very white. From the pleasure boat, another slender figure flew out nimbly. Unexpectedly, it was a brilliant silver light. Lady Yu Er's body flashed and caught Lord Lu's body in her hands. Then, she flew back into the boat. It turned out that there was a rope tied around her waist. Lady Yu returned to the boat and looked into the distance with a complicated expression. The person who was eavesdropping had already disappeared without a trace. In front of her was a dense patch of reeds. In this pitch-black night, after this delay, even if she wanted to chase after him, she would not be able to catch up. The previously awe-inspiring Lord Lu was now lying at his feet, unconscious and on the verge of death on the other side of the hidden reeds, June Moxie climbed ashore with lingering fear. Taking advantage of the darkness, he ran away naked. In his heart, he rejoiced. If not for this injury and the advancement of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, I'm afraid I really would have died this time. That was really close. With a bang, he knocked down a satisfied customer who had just come out of the brothel. His legs were weak as he walked down the road. June Moxie nimbly tore off the man's clothes and hastily put them on. Then, he disappeared like a wisp of smoke. On the ground, a fat, naked body was lying on his back. A small earthworm-like thing was tilting its head to one side. It was extremely ugly. The June family's 8 bodyguards frantically searched for their young master. They were well aware of the seriousness of this matter. If Grandpa June were to find out about this, the 8 of them would not be able to escape the crime of failing to protect the young master. If something were to happen to this young master, they did not dare to think about it anymore. Only when night fell did the 8 of them return. Just as they reached the main gate, they saw a person who looked like their young master hurriedly walking towards them from the other side. Why did they say that he looked like their young master? Because that person was wearing an extremely ill-fitting robe. His appearance was a complete mess. Although Jun Dashao was a complete debauchee, his appearance was not bad. Therefore, he paid great attention to his appearance and would definitely not be as sloppy as the person in front of him. Perhaps it was because the person looked similar. However, the 8 bodyguards looked carefully and simultaneously cried out in surprise, unable to contain their joy. This person looks like our young master, but he shouldn't be our young master. Isn't this young master June? Who else could it be? What's wrong with the 8 of you? In the afternoon, you were actually scared silly by that girl Raimu's shitty bodyguards. I called out to you several times, but you didn't respond. Jun Dashao shook his head as he hurried on with his journey. He had a look of exasperation on his face as he said, "Isn't he just a primary Tian Xian expert? How could he scare you to such an extent? Looking at you in a daze made me angry. So, I simply left first." The 8 bodyguards suddenly recalled that they had indeed been absent-minded for a moment after Yi Guhan's angry roar. Could it be that at that moment, the young master had called out to us, but we didn't respond? Then, he had angrily left on his own? They looked at June Moxie dumbfoundedly, and their minds were in chaos at the same time. They hadn't even thought to ask him, "Since you left alone, why did you return at the same time as us? We have been looking for you everywhere in Tianxiang City for a long time. Where have you been for such a long time? Also, what's the matter with that fat and vulgar robe that only a nouveau riche would wear? Also, why does your hair seem to be wet? Don't just stand there. Hurry up and give me the blazing heart meridian." June Moxie's foot had already hurriedly stepped through the door, and he commanded without turning his head. The bodyguards woke up as if from a dream. They mechanically moved their feet and followed the mysterious young master inside. Almost everyone was wondering how the young master's legs were so fast today. Was he possessed by a ghost? Jun Dashao's robe was still empty, and it was extremely cold and uncomfortable. He had to quickly change his clothes in case others found out that he had actually been swimming naked, running naked, and then stripping another man. Once he returned with his clothes, Jun Moxie's illustrious reputation would be lost in the spirit fog lake. The Jun residence's door was tightly closed behind everyone. It was already late at night, and the bright moon was in the sky. Jun Wui was still sitting in his wheelchair, quietly waiting for his nephew's return. The soft moonlight in the sky sprinkled on his resolute face, and his eyes were calm and profound. Hope, extravagant hope, or perhaps despair. The courtyard door opened, and Jun Moxie, who had changed into his own robes, walked in with a smile on his face. Jun Wui slowly turned his wheelchair and very calmly looked at Jun Moxie. He looked up and down and found that there was no problem and was relieved. "I heard that you were in the limelight this afternoon at the magnificent Jewel Hall?" "Yes," Jun Moxie bluntly said. "The magnificent Jewel Hall is too arrogant." Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. When the third uncle mentioned the magnificent Jewel Hall, why did he pause in the middle? His tone was also not right. Jun Wooey lowered his eyes and was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "Do you know, when I heard the news, I broke out in a cold sweat? Your grandfather looked fine on the surface, but I know that he was afraid. Emos, yeah. Uncle knows that you are quite courageous, but unless it is necessary, unless it is a matter of life and death, do not have any conflict with the magnificent Jewel Hall. The magnificent Jewel Hall. Our June family cannot afford to provoke them, at least for the time being. Do you understand?" This sentence was said very slowly, almost one word at a time. It was really hard to imagine that such soft words could actually come out from the mouth of such a strong man. June Moxie was also startled and slowly sat down in front of him and said, "Third uncle, this is not something you should say. Is the magnificent Jewel Hall really so terrible? Even you are afraid of them?" Jun Wooey turned his head away and did not let him see the look in his eyes, and coldly said, "If it was only me, I would naturally be able to provoke the magnificent Jewel Hall, even if it is 100 times more powerful than the magnificent Jewel Hall. So what? Life only has one life. Grass only has one spring. The worst that can happen is death. And you're the same, Emosia. I know that you're courageous and insightful, and you're not afraid of the heavens or the earth. This is something that I'm very pleased with. But I feel that you don't have a strong sense of immersion in your family. So, I hope that you can promise me, no matter what happens, you must remember that you are the son of an aristocratic family. Behind you, there's also a huge family with deep roots, the June family. The family, in the vast majority of the time, will be your greatest help, but sometimes it will also be your greatest hindrance." Jun Wooey raised his head. His eyes were bright, but seemed to contain a lot of unexplainable things. As long as there is hope for the family, we must not give up. This is the glory of an aristocratic family, and also the sorrow of an aristocratic family, but also the responsibility. Jun Moxie was silent for a long time, and then he smiled and said, "I understand. It's good that you understand." Jun Wooey gently smiled. "Because of this matter, I have been waiting for you all night. Now that you understand, accompany me for a drink." "Drink?" "For the time being, I am afraid that Uncle will not be able to drink for the next 10 days to half a month. Because I want to congratulate Third Uncle, the 5 kinds of medicinal herbs have now been prepared." Jun Moxie smiled. "And the pulse diagnosis golden needle, as early as half a month ago, has also been prepared. Third Uncle, in another 10 days, this thing you are sitting on can be dismantled to make a fire, and on the day of the fire, you can also cancel your taboo." Chapter 104. Jun Wooey's hand trembled, and the wine in his cup spilled out. He silently looked at the wheelchair handle in his right hand and stared at it for a long time. He could only feel his heart tumbling like a stormy sea. 10 years of disability. Today, a glimmer of hope had finally arrived. Jun Wooey remained silent until he left, not uttering a single word. 3 days later, Jun Jantian directly sealed the door. He passed down an order. From today onwards, no one is to be seen except by His Majesty's decree. If anyone dares to take a step into the inner courtyard, they will be killed without question. The atmosphere of the entire June family suddenly became as if they were facing a formidable enemy. It was so tense that it was hard to breathe. The door to the inner courtyard was tightly shut. Outside the door, 2 rows of bodyguards stood with their swords unsheathed, reflecting the blazing sun in the sky, shining brightly. Shadows flickered in the shadows. The power of the June family that once shook the capital was once again displayed at this moment. Moreover, this time, all the core forces that had followed Jun Jantian for decades were mobilized. Each and every one of them was absolutely trustworthy and loyal. Even those who had the slightest suspicion would be excluded from this operation. This time, Du Ju's treatment must be handled by all possible and impossible external threats, not even the slightest bit slack. A huge iron basin was placed in the middle of the inner courtyard's Forzhang wall. The volume of this iron basin could be said to be a small reservoir. It had long been filled with water and had been set up. A raging fire was burning beneath it. 6 burly men were constantly adding firewood, causing the water surface to bubble slightly. Jun Tian was dressed in a green robe with a solemn expression on his face. He wore a pair of strange gloves on his hands, which completely covered his hands and arms. Not even the slightest bit of his skin was exposed. He paced back and forth in the courtyard, appearing extremely restless. On the other hand, the white-robed Jun Wui was calm, as if he had broken away from the shackles of his soul overnight. Jun Moxie was at the side. There was a big jade plate on a table. His 2 hands quickly placed the 9-leaf grass, macaroni, and continuous severing root on the jade plate in a certain order. Then he pounded out the juice and let it flow down the slope into a wide-mouthed jade bottle. His movements were abnormally fast, but the order was orderly. Finally, Jun Moxie shouted, "Third uncle!" Jun Wui's entire body shook, and the bright yellow xian-chi of the earth rank shook fiercely. The robe covering his body instantly swelled and exploded into pieces. Jun Tian picked up his body and spread it out. Jun Moxie shouted in a low voice. In a flash, he smeared the residue of the medicine evenly on every part of Jun Wui's body. He did not let go of even the slightest bit of privacy. The 5 kinds of herbs in Jun Moxie's prescription were all highly toxic. Any one of them was a poison that would kill the moment it touched blood. Although there were only 3 of them mixed together, the moment the dregs were smeared on Jun Wui's body, Jun Wui felt as if he was suddenly thrown into a raging fire. He felt a searing pain from head to toe. He let out a muffled groan and clenched his teeth. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The pain of 3 great poisons on his body at the same time was unimaginable. But this pain was only the beginning. After smearing the dregs, Jun Moxie did not pause for a moment. He picked up the jade bottle of medicine and skillfully pinched Jun Wui's chin with his left hand. Jun Wui's tightly clenched teeth suddenly opened. He could not help but let out a muffled roar. Jun Moxie had already poured the contents of the jade bottle down his throat. Jun Wui didn't have enough time to react, and the bottle of liquid had already flowed down his throat. This liquid was very fierce, and it felt as if a ball of fire was burning down his throat. Jun Wui couldn't help but let out a muffled groan, and couldn't help but shout a few times to vent the pain in his body. Jun Xie had just opened his mouth when Jun Xie grabbed a white cloth that he had prepared earlier and stuffed it into his mouth. Jun Tian trembled. Jun Moxie's smooth and skillful movements were no different from those ruthless officials who were used to using torture. In fact, he was even better. Jun Tian could not bear to watch anymore. How could he watch his grandson torment his son? This is a necessary measure. Under extreme pain, even a most persevering person will show signs of blurring consciousness. If the mouth is not stuffed, it is very likely that the person will bite off his tongue under the intense pain. Jun Moxie picked up the intestine-cracking flower beside him and smashed it into pieces. He actually managed to take a break from the busy situation and gave an explanation. Suddenly, the 3 great poisons simultaneously flared up in Jun Wui's body. Jun Wui's naked skin turned purplish-black in an instant. At the moment when the color changed, the intestine-cracking flower's dregs had already scattered on his body. Jun Moxie's movements were extremely fast. He pulled the white cloth out of Jun Wui's mouth. The next moment, the intestine-cracking flower's venom had already entered his throat. Jun Wui didn't even have time to react before the white cloth was stuffed back into his mouth again, this time tightly gagged. Jun Wui only had time to let out a muffled groan. His eyes were almost protruding out of their sockets. Both his eyeballs were bloodshot. It was as if blood had penetrated his pupils. The intestine-splitting flower's toxicity had flared up at the same time as the other 3 poisons, and was rapidly spreading from the inside to the outside. Jun Wui felt a burning pain in his dantian, followed by an excruciating pain that seemed to be burning his soul from 10 years ago in his dantian. At this moment, the 5 poisons in Jun Wui's body, 1 old and 4 new, started to circulate at the same time. They attacked and resisted each other. His naked skin turned colorful in the blink of an eye. His waist and legs, which had not felt anything for 10 years, felt as if their bones were being sawed by a blunt knife. Finally, the hidden poison that had been hidden for 10 years was forced out. Jun Moxie breathed a sigh of relief. His eyes were fixed on the thing between Jun Wui's legs. At this critical moment, Jun Moxie's mind unexpectedly came up with a strange thought. It doesn't seem to be as big as mine. Just as he was thinking about this, Jun Tian suddenly shouted excitedly, Get up, ah! His white beard trembled as he pointed at his son's crotch. Sure enough, that thing was shaking its head. Suddenly, it flapped its head and shot up to the sky. It almost hit the nose of Jun Tian, who was bending over to check. Jun Tian's thing had not been used for more than 10 years. Today, it suddenly rose up. Naturally, it was extraordinary. Jun Moxie, who was holding the blazing heart meridian in his hand, was startled by Jun Tian's shout. He almost fell to the ground. He rolled his eyes and reprimanded. It must get up. If it can't get up, doesn't it mean that the treatment has failed? Really, is it worth making such a fuss about? Grandpa Jun hiccuped again and again. He didn't care that his grandson was actually reprimanding him. Instead, his face was full of joy. This thing had recovered. It meant that his son, who had been disabled for 10 years, had regained the basic functions of a man. Not to mention anything else, at least he could reproduce for the Jun family. For Grandpa Jun, who had always been brooding over his only son, Jun Moxie, this was simply a great blessing. Jun Wui's lips trembled. The muscles on his face twitched in pain. At this moment, a feeling of extreme shame welled up in him. Jun Tian was once a famous iron-blooded man, a warrior who had been through hundreds of battles. But now his remaining consciousness looked at the two people, one old and one young. They were actually staring at his uncontrollable treasure. Under the pain and shame, he simply let out a muffled groan and directly fainted. Out of sight, out of mind. Two grown men, one old and one young, staring at the treasure under the crotch of a strong man. That old man, he simply wanted to reach out and fiddle with it. How could he let people live? This was not something that a normal man could tolerate. Although he was his grandfather, Jun Tian was still in his 30s, wasn't he? Several men who were ferociously adding fuel to the fire stretched out their heads to look. After looking, their faces were full of shame. They lowered their heads and desperately added more firewood. The great general was indeed worthy of being called the great general. Although he hadn't used it for 10 years, he was still as majestic as ever. Inferiority. Finally, the surface of Jun Wui's skin changed from a variety of colors to a large patch of bright green. Now is the time. Jun Moxie roared and pulled out the white cloth. His left hand quickly pinched Jun Wui's chin. His right hand used the art of unlocking heaven's fortune to break the jet-black, blazing heart meridian skin. Suddenly, the black juice gushed out and dripped into Jun Wui's mouth. Then he stuffed his mouth again. This time, he used another piece of white cloth to tie a knot at the back of Jun Wui's head. In this way, even if Jun Wui was beaten to death, there would be no way for him to spit out the white cloth. After finishing, Jun Moxie threw the blazing heart meridian's skin to the side. His right hand activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and placed it on Jun Wui's chest. Pure spiritual qi surged into his body. Jun Wui's body started to swell up at a speed visible to the naked eye. His meridians and blood vessels started to protrude on the surface of his skin. They were crooked and looked like countless small purple earthworms. They were ferocious, terrifying, and extremely nauseating. Jun Moxie shouted. Jun Tian stretched out his hand, and a sky blue Xian Qi sprayed out like a dream. A bamboo raft the size of an ordinary person flew into the cauldron. At this time, the water in the cauldron was close to boiling. Jun Moxie shouted. Suddenly, both of his hands supported Jun Wui's body and floated up into the air. Jun Wui's body fell flat and landed on the bamboo raft. Jun Moxie let out a clear whistle. His body floated down on the edge of the cauldron. His body suddenly bent down and spread out his hands. Jun Tian could clearly see that at this moment, June Moxie's hands had suddenly produced dozens of shining silver needles out of thin air. The silver needles flashed, and the first needle was inserted into the Baihui acupoint. His movements were clean and neat, without the slightest bit of hesitation. Even with Jun Zhan Tian's calmness, his whole body trembled. That was the most fatal acupoint of the human body. Unable to bear it any longer, he closed his eyes and rubbed them. In a short moment that he rubbed his eyes, the silver needles in Jun Moxie's hands had already shot out. All of them were inserted into the major acupoints of Jun Wui's body. There was no lack of fatal acupoints. Then, with a light whistle, Jun Wui's body flipped in the air and landed on the bamboo raft, exposing his back. Jun Moxie spread out his hands, and another dozen silver needles appeared in each of his hands. In a flash, they were all inserted into Jun Wui's broad back. With a sigh of relief, Jun Wui pulled out the bamboo raft with a schwa sound and threw it out. Jun Wui's body directly tumbled into the boiling water. As the temperature of the water slowly rose, the sound of boiling water could be heard from the surface of the cauldron. As the water boiled, the pores of Jun Wui's body and the 7 orifices of his head continuously exuded a jet-black liquid. In just a moment, the large cauldron of water had been dyed as black as ink. Chapter 105. Jun Zhan Tian's eyebrows twitched wildly, his eyes wide open. This method of curing poison was something he had never seen or heard of before. However, the fact that Jun Zhan Tian did not die after being pierced by needles was enough to prove that this method of treatment was effective. However, looking at his own body of old ribs and then at the boiling water in the pot, Jun Zhan Tian could not help but shiver. If I were to go in, even with Tian Xian's protective Xian Qi, I reckon that I would not be able to hold out for long. I might even be cooked in a short, while the few burly men adding firewood were also sweating profusely, not only because of the heat, but also because of the fear. This is too crazy to actually put a living person into a pot of boiling water and cook him like this. What if the person is cooked to death? With this temperature, it will be difficult not to cook him, right? Jun Moxie was still standing firmly on the edge of the pot, his eyes unblinking as he watched Jun Wui's body tumbling in the water, closely watching every change. His face was calm, expressionless, almost cold. Suddenly, Jun Moxie did not hesitate to put his left hand into the boiling water and scooped up Jun Wui's entire body. His hand was covered in a layer of blisters. Half of it was scalded by boiling water, while the other half was corroded by the poison. However, Jun Wui's body was the complete opposite. In fact, his skin was now fair. In fact, that terrifying and strange color had already faded from his skin. With a swoosh, he flew down and landed beside Jun Zhan Tian. Just as Jun Zhan Tian caught him, Jun Moxie pressed his right hand on Jun Wui's dantian and activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. After a long time, Jun Moxie's face became paler and paler, while Jun Wui's face became rosier and rosier. Finally, the golden needles in Jun Wui's body were forced out bit by bit. They shook and trembled. Finally, with a pu sound, a silver needle flew out along with a stream of black blood, then the next one. Finally, the silver needle on the Baihui acupoint flew out with a qi sound, bringing with it a thin stream of blood. It was actually 6-colored. Jun Moxie grunted and slowly retracted his palm. He sat cross-legged and slowly adjusted his breathing. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Before he withdrew his palm, Jun Wui suddenly opened his eyes, and 2 sharp rays of light shot out from his eyes. Light blue. It was light blue. What does this mean? All the poison had been removed. The seal was broken. Jun Wui's 10 years of accumulated Xian Qi burst out, coupled with the huge effect of the blazing heart meridian. In this short moment, his Xian Qi was directly promoted from the middle level of the Earth profound realm to the initial level of the Tian Xian. In the blink of an eye, he had risen by 3 levels. Not only that, but under the effect of the blazing heart meridian, Jun Wui was immune to all poisons. A super strong expert was born. Seeing this light blue light, Jun Zhan Tian suddenly jumped up high. His mouth opened wide, and his eyes bulged as if he had seen a ghost. His right hand unconsciously exerted force, and, with a cry of pain, he actually pulled out a lock of his beard. He had practiced hard for most of his life, and now he was only at the middle level of the Tian Xian. Although his disabled son was once known as a martial arts genius, but for him to be able to rush to the middle level of the Earth profound realm at his age was already quite commendable. Not to mention, he was seriously injured and spent 10 years in a wheelchair. Just like that, the moment the seal was opened, he directly rose to the sky Xian realm like a rocket. This world is really crazy. Jun Zhan Tian shook his head, his heart feeling very confused. 3 parts of joy, 3 parts of relief, 3 parts of excitement, and half of fear. The last part was that he suspected that he was in a dream. On one hand, he was so happy that he wanted to sing and dance. On the other hand, he was so shocked that he was speechless. For a moment, his heart was filled with mixed feelings, and he was actually unable to speak. Even if he was really in a dream, he wished that he would wake up from this beautiful dream a moment later. Jun Wui clearly felt that his legs, which he had not felt for 10 years, had a strange feeling of numbness and itchiness. At the same time, he also felt the smooth flow of Xian Qi through his meridians, and his heart was suddenly moved. I can finally stand up again. My old enemy, I, Jun Wui, will look for you in the near future. I will look for you to collect the debt you owe me. His body moved, and he wanted to stand up and experience what it felt like to walk on 2 legs again. Third uncle, you still need to sit down for the time being. Don't move. Please be patient for a while. Jun Moxie's tired voice came from behind him. At this time, you still need to calm your mind and circulate your Xian Qi. Firstly, the Blazing Heart Meridian's medicinal strength is enormous, and the toxins have already been expelled from the body due to resisting the previous 5 poisons. However, the internal benefits have all remained in third uncle's body. If you do not resolve it as soon as possible and use it for your own use, it will not be good. Secondly, third uncle's lower body has not moved for 10 years, and his blood vessels are blocked. He still needs to circulate it 360 times before his blood vessels can flow smoothly as he wishes. Only then can he be safe. Jun Moxie closed his eyes and slowly said, "This kind of moment of ecstasy was a big obstacle on a person's path of cultivation. If one were to seize the time to meditate and consolidate his mind in this situation, it would be of great benefit to his future cultivation and spiritual realm. It must be known that the 500-year-old Blazing Heart Meridian's medicinal strength was enormous. With its own strength, it could fight poison with poison against the old and 4 new poisons in Jun Wui's body. The toxicity of the Blazing Heart Meridian could be imagined. However, in addition to its toxicity, the Blazing Heart Meridian's medicinal strength was also extremely outstanding. Its effect was in no way inferior to the poison. In Jun Moxie's medical case, the original plan was to fight poison with poison and use the Blazing Heart Meridian's poison to forcefully resist the other 5 poisons. Then, with the help of boiling water and silver needles, he would expel the poison in one fell swoop. There were no accidents, and it was quite smooth. Next, he should have used the Blazing Heart Meridian's powerful medicinal strength to nourish his body. However, it would take half a month before he could fully recover. After all, Jun Wui's body had been crippled for a long time. With such a huge nourishment, it was inevitable that he would not be able to withstand it, so he had to slowly recuperate. But a few days ago, Jun Daxiao discovered that his own mysterious art of unlocking heaven's fortune, in addition to recuperating himself, could also be used to help others. Moreover, the effect was great. Looking at the memories of his 2 lives, there was no cultivation method that could be compared to it. Moreover, it had a wonderful effect. It was not afraid of all poisons in the world. It really lived up to its name of good fortune. Jun Daxiao thought about it and changed his original plan. After dispelling the poison, He would directly use his own strength to nourish Jun Sanye's body. Not only was this method effective, it was even more remarkable. In just a short period of time, Jun Sanye had been reborn. The huge benefits of the Blazing Heart Meridian had nowhere to vent. So, it was converted into Xian Qi and integrated into Jun Sanye's body. Jun Sanye had been in seclusion for 10 years, and the results were not mediocre. The two Xian Qi and true essences were instantly fused into one, and this Xian Qi and true essences were equivalent to an ordinary person's cultivation for at least 50 years. This explained why Jun Wui had been disabled for 10 years. Although he had painstakingly cultivated Xian Qi for 10 years, it was impossible for him to recover and become a Tian Xian expert. All of this was due to Jun Moxie's good fortune mysterious art, which allowed everything to flow smoothly. Jun Wui's body paused for a moment, but he did not dare to neglect. He sat down and tried his best to control the myriad of emotions in his heart. He tried to calm himself down and immerse himself in cultivation as soon as possible. Even so, it took him 10 times more time than usual to finally stabilize his mind. The Xian Qi finally began to flow according to the normal route, and he slowly entered into a state where he forgot about himself and everything else. Jun Moxie had only meditated for a moment, but the art of unlocking heaven's fortune that he had consumed was quickly replenished by the Hongjun Pagoda. Slowly getting up, he came face to face with Junjian Tian's excited eyes. Xia. Junjian Tian looked at his grandson in a daze for a moment. Suddenly, tears streamed down his face. He was unable to say a single word. Despite his age, the white-haired Grandpa Jun was crying bitterly like a child. For so many years, the famed general who had caused enemy monarchs and generals to flee upon hearing his name had actually lost his composure like this. Jun Moxie's heart ached, and he lowered his head in dejection. For so many years, who could understand the bitterness in this old man's heart? What kind of pain and suffering had he endured? Originally, he had a house full of children and grandchildren, a happy and harmonious life. His position was high, and he was above tens of thousands of people. Suddenly, 2 of his sons died on the battlefield, and the only remaining son was crippled for life. How unbearable was this for a father? Losing his father in his youth, his wife in his middle age, and his son in his old age. Junjian Tian, who was an extremely high official, had all 3 of them, but the heavens still felt that the blow was not heavy enough. The 2 grandsons he had painstakingly nurtured, where all his hopes rested, had gone to the battlefield on the eve of their wedding. They never returned, and not even their bones were left. When the news arrived, Junjian Tian was ordering people to decorate the bridal chamber. He was waiting for his grandson to come back and get married. He was waiting to hold his great-grandson, and his heart was filled with joy and longing. When the news arrived, Junjian Tian's hair and beard turned white overnight. The joyful laughter of the past, and the scene of a family sitting around a table, enjoying the bliss of a family reunion, was still before his eyes. But it was gone forever. In such a large family, other than himself, there was only a crippled son and a disappointing debauchee grandson. Desolation filled his eyes. Thus, Junjian Tian became depressed. He was in despair, and there was no hope. But amidst this hopelessness, his once incomparably disappointed grandson, Jun Moxie, appeared out of thin air. His previous debauchee appearance had been washed away, and he had become lofty and unyielding. Moreover, he had a deep and astute mind, and his thoughts were nimble. There was a faint air of astuteness and foresight. This had already greatly comforted Grandpa Jun's heart, and he felt extremely excited. Unexpectedly, an even bigger surprise had yet to come. His own son's disability, which had once rendered all the world's doctors helpless, had actually been cured by his grandson. The heavens have mercy! Junjian Tian finally burst into tears of joy. Decades of depression and worry had been swept away. The heavens have mercy, And my June family can also have today hope and a future. Not only does the June family have a successor, but the student has also surpassed the master. Even if this old man closes his eyes now, he can still smile in the underworld without any regrets. Even the ancestors of the June family in the underworld can calmly smile. Grandpa June was so excited that he could no longer speak, but his body was trembling after a long time. Chapter 106. He slowly lowered his head and looked at his strong and powerful legs. He slowly moved them a few times and even kicked them a few times. Suddenly, he burst into laughter. As he laughed, his face was filled with tears. This iron-blooded man of the past, the all-powerful general, did not shed a tear even when he was plotted against. But now that he had recovered, his eyes were streaming with tears. Through his tears, he saw his old father and his nephew standing in front of him with a smile, looking at him warmly. Jun Wui was excited. He quickly took 2 steps forward and suddenly knelt down. This unfilial child has no intention of paying respects to father. It has been 10 years since he has paid his respects to his father. Jun Tian's whole body trembled. His voice was trembling. My son, get up, quickly get up, mo xie. Jun Wui stood up and looked deeply at Jun Moxie. Third uncle's life was saved by you. Boy, he hadn't even finished speaking when Jun Mo xie interrupted him with a smile. Third uncle, you're talking like that. You're still alive and well. Besides, I'm your nephew. How can I write 2 characters with the character Jun in one stroke? We're a family, so there's no need to say thank you. You don't need to treat me as a junior. Jun Woo laughed straightforwardly and looked deeply at his nephew. At this moment, he wholeheartedly made a decision in his heart. Now that I've stood up, the Jun family's heavy burden will fall on my shoulders. I, Jun Wooey, have unsheathed my sword which has been covered in dust for 10 years. Not for the country, not for the common people, only for the Jun family, only for Mo Xie. Third uncle, Jun Mo Xie, suddenly chuckled. His chuckle was quite strange and malicious, causing the 2 of them to scratch their heads in confusion. She looked at him in confusion. Third uncle, although your capital is not small, but... Jun Moxie laughed so hard that his whole body was convulsing, although Grandpa would definitely be very willing to see you standing so valiantly and proudly. Your nephew, will still be shy. Shouldn't you cover yourself? Ha! Jun Moxie winked as he looked at Jun Wooey's crotch. It turned out that ever since Jun Wooey came back from the treatment, he was still completely naked. When he found out that he had fully recovered, he was so excited that he didn't even notice this. Even now, he was still standing upright, shaking his head, looking rather high-spirited. After waiting for 10 years, when would he be able to test his spear? Jun Tian was reminded by Jun Mo Xie's words, and then looked at his son's majestic figure. He couldn't help but blow his beard and laugh heartily. Jun Wuyi's face suddenly turned purple as he gnashed his teeth in hatred. You little bastard, just you wait for me. I'll deal with you later. With a swoosh, he disappeared, leaving the grandfather and grandson holding their stomachs and laughing heartily without a care for their image. After a while, Jun Wooey, dressed in a green robe, whizzed over. He rubbed his palms and said, Kid, don't run if you have the guts. Jun Moxie was shocked and screamed, Help, I don't know how to fight. He turned around and ran. But how could his current speed compare to Jun Wooey, who had just advanced to the Tianxian realm? His buttocks were being hit by Jun Wooey accurately. Jun Moxie laughed as he ran and begged for mercy. Jun Wooey completely ignored him and continued to beat him. Jun Moxie had no choice but to run behind Grandpa Jun. He grabbed his sleeves and dodged left and right. Jun Wooey snorted angrily and chased after him. Even though Grandpa Jun had the mental fortitude of a Sky Xian level expert, he was still dizzy from being spun around by these 2 people. However, he was still able to laugh heartily. This kind of familial happiness had not appeared in this family for a very, very long time, seeing that the 6 burly men were about to lift the big iron pot and pour it away. Jun Moxie could not care less about being beaten. He hurriedly shouted, Stop! This is a good thing. It can't be poured away. When he said that, Jun Wui and Jun Tian were surprised. Jun Wui had beaten his nephew until the whole family was beaming with joy. The embarrassment had long disappeared, and they stood at the side with a smile. This is such a useful thing. How can it be poured away so casually? It is very useful. Jun Moxie drove the burly man away from the iron pot and turned around. He picked up a leather bag from the side and poured a lot of things into the big iron pot. It was as if a ladle of cold water had been poured into boiling oil. Crackling sounds could be heard. After Jun Moxie finished pouring, he quickly retreated. When the black water from the pot fell onto the ground, it immediately turned black. Jun Wui and Grandpa Jun were dumbfounded. This kind of poison is too vicious. What did you pour into the pot? Why is it so overbearing? Grandpa Jun was not ashamed to ask. Grandpa Jun could see that there was something strange about this grandson of his. He could not use common sense to speculate on him. It is actually snake venom, just that there are slightly more types, Jun Moxie said with a smile. There are a total of 13 types of snake venom here. As he said that, Jun Moxie pointed at the big iron pot. Grandfather, third uncle, look. Third uncle's bathwater is a combination of 6 types of poison. However, due to the mutual enhancement and restraint between them, they are able to coexist peacefully. But after the addition of the snake venom, this big pot of water becomes the most poisonous thing in the world. We only need to mix them evenly, dilute them with water, and place them in a wooden bucket. Then, we insert the weapons of our family warriors into the water and soak it for a period of time. That will immediately turn it into a poisonous weapon. When the war is over, too vicious, too despicable, too shameless. If such a weapon were to stab into the body of an enemy, there is no need to stab a vital point. Just a little scratch on the hands or feet would be enough to be fatal. Such a poisonous thing. Even with Grandpa Jun's cultivation, Tian Xian, he might not be able to withstand it for long. Truly terrifying. It was exceptionally frightening. Jun Tian and Jun Wui stretched their necks further and further as their eyes widened. At this moment, they looked at Jun Moxie as if they were looking at a demon that had escaped from hell. Both of them shuddered at the same time. Compared to the harmonious and joyous atmosphere of the Jun family, the Grand Preceptor's mansion was in a gloomy and miserable state. Although Li Jun and Meng Haizhou were driven out of the magnificent jewel hall on the spot, and the Li family was deprived of the right to enter the magnificent jewel hall, but as long as the Meng family's box was still there was no problem at all. Moreover, the most important thing was that the jade coral that had been successfully traded was finally brought back to the magnificent jewel hall in one piece. Just based on this point alone, it was a great achievement, and at least the merits outweighed the demerits. After Li Yuran saw the jade coral, she listened to Li Jun's frightening report with a smile on her face. Li Jun anxiously thought that Li Yuran would fly into a rage and punish him, but he did not expect that Li Yuran would lightly say, "Oh, 5 million taels? Not expensive at all." No matter how you look at it, the Tang family also participated in the competition. For you to be able to buy the jade coral is already very good. Little brother Jun, later you can go to Manager Li in the accounts room and collect the 3 million taels that you paid in advance. Regarding the Li family's right to enter the magnificent jewel hall, such a great shame and humiliation, Li Yuran did not even mention it. It was really puzzling. This sentence made Li Jun and Meng Haizhou almost unable to believe their ears. They almost thought that the person standing in front of them was not Li Yuran, but rather someone else. Since when did young Master Yuran become so easy to talk to? The two of them stared blankly for a long time, as if they had just awoken from a dream. Although they were puzzled, at the moment everything was fine. They could not help but let out a big sigh of relief and thank her profusely. Li Yuran sat quietly and smiled as she looked at the sparkling and translucent jade coral in front of her. After a long time, she let out a sigh and said to herself, "I was really careless. I did not take into account that old Master Tang also needed this thing. If I had missed this opportunity, it would have been my fault. However, With such a price, if it was not for these two debauches, I am afraid that if it was someone else, they would have given up in fear. This is perhaps the only advantage of being a debauchee. As the saying goes, a ruler is short, an inch is short. A person should make the best use of everything. This is probably what it means. Speaking up to here, she chuckled twice. Her palms stealthily circulated her xianqi, and her whole body flashed with a golden light. She then withdrew her hands and said with a happy face, "The rumors are indeed true. This thing contains a very large amount of heaven and earth energy. If grandfather absorbs this energy, even if he cannot practice xianqi again, it would be more than enough to prolong his life." She gracefully stood up and picked up the jade coral before walking towards the Grand Preceptor Li Shang's study room. In the study room, Grand Preceptor Li narrowed his eyes as he looked at the jade coral in front of him. His face revealed a happy smile. Firstly, it was for the sake of his own health. Secondly, it was for the sake of his grandson's filial piety. Grand Preceptor Li suddenly felt that with a grandson like this, what more could he ask for? "Grandfather, this matter should not be delayed. If others were to find out about it, it might be a long night and many dreams. Why don't we use the method that my master once told us? I will activate the energy, and grandfather will absorb this good thing as soon as possible." Li Yuran smiled warmly and elegantly. Li Shang chuckled and said thoughtfully, "That's good too. Go and call them out. They will protect us, grandfather and grandson." Li Yuran hummed and clapped her hands twice. In an instant, there was a rustling sound from outside. A person said respectfully, "Master, young master, we have already tightly controlled the area of 30 feet around the study room. Do we need to increase it?" Li Yuran said gently, "Enough." The person outside responded and did not make another sound. Li Shang looked at his grandson with a gratified expression and asked, "Have your martial brothers returned?" Li Yuran said, "Yes, they have already returned to the mountain. Their journey was safe and there were no accidents. I will definitely pass on grandfather's concern." Li Shang coughed twice and said with a smile, "We are grandfather and grandson. Why are we talking about this? It's a pity that your master cannot come down personally. If he could come, our Li family would have the greatest guarantee." Sigh. He let out a long sigh. "Master is preparing for the appointment at Heaven's equal peak in 3 years. I am afraid that he cannot be distracted for the time being. But with the help of my martial brothers, I believe that it will be more than enough to deal with these matters in Tianxiang Kingdom. As long as it is not an army expedition, we do not have to worry about anything." Li Shang nodded noncommittally. He let out a deep breath and said excitedly, "Since this matter should not be delayed, let us begin now." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.